Making a big decision on the Paris Accord over the next 2 weeks. We're signing a health care plan within 2 weeks. We're going to call it the Gold Card, and we're going to start selling, hopefully, in about 2 weeks. So we can just sit down, and I'll do this at some point over the next 2 weeks. They would have had a nuclear weapon within 2 weeks. We'll have something in 2 weeks. You'll have your approval in 2 weeks. I could answer that question better in 2 weeks. I'll let you know in about 2 weeks. You can ask that question in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. I think in 2 weeks we'll know which way I'm going.
This is not Iraq. This is not endless.
We're already substantially ahead of our time projections.
I don't know how long it'll take. We have objectives. We will do this as long as it takes to achieve those objectives.
The achievable objectives of Operation Epic Fury we expect to last about 4 to 6 weeks.
This is only just the beginning.
We've already won in many ways, but we haven't won enough. We're achieving major strides toward completing our military objective. And some people could say they're pretty well complete. Could call it a tremendous success right now as we leave here, I could call it, or we could go further, and we're going to go further.
You said it would be over soon. Are you thinking this week it will be over?
No,
Are you talking
but soon.
about days?
I think.
It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Wednesday, April 8th, 2026. Thank you for joining me today. Well, it's interesting. I was trying to find the obvious compilations that we know exist. I probably could have made one if I had thought about it earlier today, of just the endless, and I mean just the conversation of Iran, and we've all laughed about it, the just kind of absurd transition of, and I'm not talking about some unseen hand of things that might, it all worked out in the end because there was a deal going on behind the scenes. Maybe that's going on now. We'll get into it. But I mean the things we can prove were lied about. The oil tankers he claimed went through the strait that provably did not. I mean, the many points. The point would be to make a compilation of how many times he's made certain statements that didn't come to pass, statements that were bluster, that were false, that were, just incredible. Because clearly we're going to talk about that today. And that'll be the focal point, about the absurd reality of where this really is. And even last night, you might have wondered if where we thought this was going was wrong. We might have wondered, and I myself last night was like, because like I've been discussing, like with Venezuela was the point I made. I didn't expect it to go that direction. I would have predicted, and I didn't make many around that, but I would have predicted if it was asked of me that it would probably not have gone that direction. My point in saying all that is that based on the evidence we have, and it's very clearly being manipulated and held close to the chest by our government, it seemed as if this was all being lied about. And so last night I thought, okay, maybe that was incorrect. Maybe they did have some master plan. Maybe it's all. And then of course, like I expected, even last night, you immediately got the pushback from Iran. But even then, maybe Iran was the one lying, right? Because that's how we have to be objective about this. Whatever, group you think you're on the side of, or people you disagree with, or whatever it is, whatever the good guy, bad guy dynamic is, it shouldn't be that you ignore information because it helps the bad guy or whatever. It should be about facts. And so last night, that's where it was possible. Iran already denying it. And then through today, which we're going to go through, probably in not taking a very long time to do it, it's very clear to me that this is something that is, at the very least, that there's manipulation playing out here, whether that's Trump lying to us, whether that's Israel lying to Trump, or his team with Israel lying to him. There's a disconnect happening here. And my gut tells me, as we'll get into today, that this is what we've been seeing so far, and in fact, quite literally what I've been predicting for the last couple of weeks, which is that Donald Trump would essentially, because they were losing. And again, if we can't even acknowledge the basic realities of what we can prove, interceptors, the reality of what Iran has done, despite what they claimed they weren't going to be able to do, like things we can prove because we see them happening, that, you can very clearly acknowledge that it's very least not like Iran's being destroyed. That's not what's happening. Navy and airspace aside, it's just not the reality of the war. It's using things that people don't understand to manipulate people that understand it. And so the point was clearly that with that reality, the way this has all gone down, it seems clear to me that Trump was on his back foot. And at the very least, he didn't, whether he knew it or not, that seemed to be the reality. And I think whether he knew it or not, that's now become clear to him. And my opinion was you saw this shift. You saw the shift in terminology. You saw the shift in the way he discussed this. And basically, to sum this up quickly in the beginning, my argument was that he was going to lie about essentially achieving an agreement, even though Iran was clear that we were not engaging with the conversations. And I'll make a point about that in a second. But that he would lie and say, we did it. We got them to agree to do what they were already doing. Even if they go, that's not true, he'll still, they don't want to admit it. But so my point about Iran, which is important, is that Iran wasn't saying they were ignoring everything, right? What did we discuss? Iran was clearly saying, we are shutting down all channels of communication. We're shutting down all, that doesn't mean they're ignoring anything. Now, whether they actually still had like Pakistan or a channel there or not, or they lied about that, which is possible. It's pretty clear that they could simply just be looking at what's going on, what Trump is saying, and understand what's being put forward. So my point was Iran was not saying we're ignoring anything. What I said is they shut down the actual discussions of a ceasefire or any kind of a negotiation. But what they were not doing was ignoring anything. So the point was they put forward 10 points, or even before that, right when this all kicked off and it was clear that they were not going to negotiate, they said, we want these demands and we're not talking with you anymore. So when I say they're not ignoring everything, my point is that if Trump were to come forward and say, well, here, we're going to give you everything you wanted. Well, then yesterday and before it spun out today is what we would have seen, right? Because Iran wanted this to end based on everything we can see. That could still be wrong, but the evidence suggests that they wanted this to stop. And so that the argument that they would have just ignored Trump entirely and not engage at all would seem counterintuitive with what they seem to want to achieve and in their interest, I would argue. So it's possible that Trump gave them, at least claimed to give them everything they wanted, and realized this is through Witkoff and Kushner. He's not in that room. So let's not pretend that Trump is the one relaying these things. So there's a very important disconnect between people who we know are working, and I would argue no, for another element. So what comes back to the point is that if this will, if you're unfamiliar with a lot of this will make more sense as we go through the actual points and the statements. For those that have been following along, the idea seems pretty clear that if Trump's on his back foot, he would want to get out of this. He would want to make some kind of a narrative that makes it sound like he won, knowing the typical people out there would say he won no matter what. As long as he yelled he won, they would come out and go, whatever just happened, he won indecisive, or, just won in a very spectacular way. And so Iran would accept ultimately what Trump would give them if it was the end of the war. He would then be able to say, I did it, we won, we ended this, and just keep lying about what happened, right? So now at that point, that's where I was yesterday, thinking maybe there's more that I'm not seeing. Maybe they accepted it. Now coming to today, it seems pretty clear that now Iran is saying, well, we agreed to something, but you are not upholding that part of it. So this is where it starts to become clear that either Trump did what I said and just lied about what he wanted them to accept so he could stand up and go, they accepted it, it's over, we did it, even though he knew that they would ultimately see that they lied, or something, their disconnect, where Iran was offered something. Even Trump stated, I'll show you deliberately, explicitly, the 10-point plan that they offered. So there's a whole disconnect here with the whole 15-point argument. And then between Kushner and Witkoff and Israel, there was a deception that took place where Trump was told they accepted his thing and they were told he accepted their thing. And now here we are. Now, again, if that's confusing, which I'm sure it is to a lot of people, we'll go through this all so you can better understand how this started, what happened in between it yesterday to today, and what's currently being stated, and how it's already being shown that they've already. Now, here's what's funny. As I've said and been very clear about, they have never closed the strait. It's been restricted based on any definition of either of those words. It has been restricted from the very beginning. They were allowing people through. It's been a whole game. We'll get into it more as we go through it. The point is that, and now, arguably, they have actually shut it down. Or at least that's what they're stating. Or you could argue they're just going back to the state they were in. My argument would be that they have shut it down for anybody involved with what's going on to them, with what in the illegal war against them. And so that all came around because they've now stated today that Trump and everybody else has violated the ceasefire, not even 24 hours into this. Now, it's been clear. They said the U.S. has violated this. They said Israel has violated this. And I'll show you points that go back instantly. Right after they claimed the agreement, Israel bombed an aluminum plant. Right after that, they were bombing in Iran, that's the same point, but then also bombing Lebanon, which is really one of the important parts because it was clear that Lebanon was part of the conversation. From what Pakistan said, what everybody was acknowledging, they just lied, guys. This is very, very easy to see. And so Israel, like I told you, was going to continue to go after Lebanon. And they were the ones that told us Lebanon was part of this. They told us it is Iran. Now you want us to believe that if you make a deal with Iran, that's not included, even though you told us it was them? They're drowning in their dishonesty right now. Anybody who's not a blind follower, who has any level of intelligence, is going to be able to decipher this because it's blatant. Now, there's a few things we're going to get into to start. Just a couple of quick things that I want to try to go through quickly that in some ways are relevant to the bigger picture. Some are just about the biometric stuff that I want you to see. But today we're largely going to focus on this one topic and just how incredible this all is. As I titled the show, The Trump Who Cried Wolf, because this is not new, guys. This is what he does. It's what politicians do, quite frankly. But he's just been a kind of a bombastic example of this. And my gut read on this, based on the evidence, is that they are in a weak position. And that doesn't mean they're going to stop belligerently bombing. But at the end of the day, the question is how long this will be allowed to continue. How long will Israel be allowed to drive this based on what it wants to accomplish at the expense of American interests and American life? And then also just whatever restrictions affect the global trade. How long will they allow? I mean, everyone knows what's actually driving this if we're paying attention. So how long? It's a question. So let's start with a couple of points I want you to see. One, I just want to shout out a great conversation I had with Patrick Henningsen. This was yesterday. The dying American empire, and lies about Iran and the coup within the United States, where he argues, like I would agree, that the technocratic people in the front row of Trump's inauguration, along with the Israel influence, essentially he argues that Trump's second administration was effectively a coup. I happen to agree. Whether you believe, a bloodless coup, if you will. Transition of power, manipulation. Lies about Iran, obviously, you know what that's about. But we discussed where this empire really is, and it's an important conversation. We also had another great discussion, our bi-monthly, it seems now, podcast with Charlie Robinson, which is What the Hell is Happening? Usually just more of a kind of sprawling conversation. We just let it go where it goes about what we think is important, and just, I've always enjoyed talking with him. That will be linked in here as well, but I have it in another post. But important to check these out. These were both over the last couple of days. Now, on a couple of opening points, one thing I just really hope we don't miss, and I know you guys are all aware of, but as Haaretz points out, yesterday, the 6th, and still to this very day, Israeli airstrikes near school kills at least 10 Palestinians in Gaza, according to WHO. According to medics, but WHO staff also killed. UN, WHO, I'm still to this day blown away how we can pretend like there's any semblance of order in the world while this can happen and nobody cares. And as Tehran Tadag, I believe he's that's right. He's the kind of comedian commentator. He says they're still murdering Palestinians in Gaza every day as well, just in case anybody gives an F. I know you do. That's why you're here. But just make sure people don't lose sight of what this, I just hate even talking about it because we feel ineffectual. How can we all see it continue? And even though we all see it and we're all talking about it, it just doesn't stop. Israel, every horrible thing that Israel is today, and as the government alone, is on full display. And every second we're talking, more Gazans are being starved and tortured and killed right now. I'm sorry to stress that, but this has to be something we never let go. Now, in regard to a couple of partisan points, this is still going around, and I want people to make sure this is seen. By the way, in case you didn't see it, it's funny, Laura Loomer is screeching and calling out Alex Jones as a traitor now because he's the one discussing why Trump should be removed from power. But I'll end with points today that show you that that's really not what's happening. It's the game he plays where he floats the ideas of what you want to hear and then goes right back to support. At the end of the day, right now it's about we have to get Trump to push out the Israel support. But didn't you just tell us Israel's controlling Trump, but now we have to work with Trump to get rid of the Israel? It's just some mental gymnastics to go to trust the plan, to keep support. We got to help on the midterms. We have to support his people he puts in place. It's just kind of frustrating. But anyway, they're openly discussing basically a treasonous act, which is interesting to me, which makes me feel it's more theater than anything else. But Trump says Trump has become disloyal to the old Trump. That's the point. Yeah, he's the same person, guys. And call this out if you see it, because if you're not a complete child, you already know this, because he did the same things in his first administration, conducted the same lies, the same clumsy efforts that are only just now being seen through by some. He's the same person he always was. When we tried to tell you, Alex Jones, that he was the same person right now that he was that he is now in 2024, you openly called us black-pilled. You all remember that. Derek and I, Whitney and I, we're all screaming and jumping up and down and going, this is a problem. He's going to go to war with Iran. He's compromised by Israel. And you called us black-pilled. Like, quite literally pointed to us and said you're black-pilled. If you were honest, you'd admit you drove this all into reality more than anyone through either stupidity or opportunism. But I doubt you'll do that. But it should matter to everybody that he does not acknowledge this overwhelming influence that he put to drive people to support this guy, even if he was just mistaken. But that won't happen, guys. Now what you're getting, instead of any actual change, they're the all flash, no substance administration. Well, guess what? Coming soon, the Kennedy podcast. Good, great, guys. Well, after all the failures, omissions, and outright lies from this administration and Kennedy personally, clearly what we all need is another podcast. More narrative, more partisanship, right? That's the answer. How can anyone not see through this, guys? Hashtag glyphosate, mRNA, food dyes, fluoride, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, keep telling us what we want to hear, because that's going to change everything. Well, to the real point today, I want to start with this point about this kind of thing he does. They're foolish. There's a level that's, I think, flatly failing. Just to be very clear, like completely and utterly failing, because even the conservatives, more so specifically the conservatives, are not falling for this right now. I've been saying that since January. I'm glad people are finally starting to see it. Who cares if they acknowledge that we were aware of it back then? The point is that he does this game where he tries to gaslight people. Trump's message to Americans who do not support the illegal war that nobody wanted, he promised not to do, right? His response, they're foolish. Okay. Well, even if you want to argue this is in the interest of Americans, the response to say that you're foolish for not supporting something you were promised wouldn't happen is insane to me. And it's so obvious. It's glaring and it's embarrassing. And this is my point, guys, is if you're honest people who aren't only focused on team politics, all see through this, because it's like, I'm just like it's ridiculous. It's like arguing that up is down. Right? It's just, well, no, it's not, guys. It's a ridiculous argument. To say this is just not true. So the point is that he does this constantly to try to get people who are a little bit weak-minded, I guess, to just fall back in line because, well, he said, I'm not a Republican if I don't believe what he says. So I want to be a Republican. And that's how this works. I argue it's not working for most, but here he is saying this.
What do you say to Americans who are not a fan of the war?
They're foolish because the war is about one thing. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon.
Yeah, the thing that they don't have, that never wanted to seek, that the evidence shows they never did or won't seek, and the fact is that your intelligence told you they didn't, and that's why you hate Gabbard right now, apparently. But keep screaming the lie, because that's all you've got.
Had we not broken the Barack Hussein Obama agreement, the
JCPOA, where effectively was where you now claim you're trying to get to. Literally, guys. What he's claiming he's achieving right now was already met by the JCPOA and was upheld, roundly proven by the very groups he wants you to think right now will confirm the deal he's making. The International Atomic Energy Agency, who confirmed that they had upheld their deal every single moment until Trump unilaterally pulled out of the deal, which caused them the legal, allowed increasement of enrichment based on the deal they agreed to. This is my point, guys. If you care, that's very easy to look up. It's like claiming Obama gave them all this money. Well, he did, but it was money they stole and gave back to them. Now, here's a funny point we're going to get to today. Right now, there's an argument that one of the points from Iran is to repay certain things from what they made them spend and vice versa, or rather, and additional points. I doubt it'll happen, but hypothetically, should Donald Trump send this money to them, even if it's based on a legitimate deal because they promised to give money back that they stole or because it was money they spent, whatever. You go forward 2 administrations, I promise you, they'll look back and say, Trump gave terrorists money, just like they do with Obama now, because they're all liars. And they always deceive you based on the current objective. But overall, what do you say here?
Barack Hussein Obama agreement. You know what I'm talking about, the Iran nuclear deal. This is years ago, my first term.
If you ask him what it's really called, he wouldn't even know.
You would have had a total, Israel would have been gone.
Oh, okay. So what he's actually trying to say here, which I'm not sure if he understands what he's talking about, I think he doesn't. You're saying that if you had not broken the deal, right, the deal which kept them in a compliance with the IEA, which you want to comply for them now, okay, and you broke that deal, which then gave them the legal reality, the legal allowance to increase that enrichment. So you're telling me that by breaking the deal, because you did that, that's why they never got, but that doesn't make any sense. By breaking the deal, It led to what they're doing now, which you claim led to a bomb. So wait a minute. You broke the deal, which allowed them to do it, but they never actually reached a bomb. They never actually did what they claimed, but they did increase enrichment to about 60%, which is what was allowed currently by the IAEA. You could prove it. And that is the problem, because that's, if you hadn't done that, they would have gotten to where they are. So either way, you're saying they would have ended up here. How does that make sense? Again, you don't need to even do this. If you're not a moron, it's obvious that he's just grifting. He's just kind of off the cuff, and he doesn't even know what he's talking about. Or he just doesn't know how to lie any better, but that's just not true, because you can walk through it either way. If he had stayed in the deal, they would have maintained the level of enrichment that was within the deal, and they wouldn't have seeked a weapon. And Israel has made that clear by lying about it for 20 years and never actually showing you anything, and it never actually came to pass. So he pulled out, and then they were able to continue to increase enrichment. They had a new deal with the International Atomic Energy Agency. They've maintained that deal, and you guys lied yet again to get us here. Gabbard told you they didn't have it. The evidence showed you before this, but your argument is because you did that, you saved everybody? This is why everybody is starting to laugh at this person. I mean, more than usual. Not just the Democrats who will dunk on back and forth. It's not that. People who are not stupid are starting to go, wow, this guy is ridiculous. It's just obvious if you're not lying to yourself, guys. You can't make statements like that and act like that's not a joke. He either literally doesn't know what he's talking about and is even getting facts turned around and they make contradictory statements, or he's just lying to you.
Extinguished. Israel would have been wiped off the face of the earth, and the entire Middle East would have been, at a minimum, in big trouble.
Oh, at a minimum, in an unqualified statement based on no metrics. At a minimum, just in trouble, whatever. God, it's worthy of ridicule. Now, look, as I've always said, Trump's not stupid. There's plenty of things where he does, but I find him quite crafty, but there's different levels of intelligence. When it comes to certain things, I 100% doubt he can draw a flawless Middle East map on the back of a coaster or whatever it was. I highly doubt he's the most well-read person in every room he walks into. That's just dumb, based on everything we can see. But I'm not going to say he's stupid either. But I want you to understand that this is a person who's put in a position where he's not. He's out of his depth. He made that statement when he got elected the first time. I don't know all this stuff, but I'm going to surround myself with the smartest people in the room. Well, clearly you failed this time around, and last time too, really. But this is a spectacular failure with probably the dumbest people I can see in any given room circling you. Quite the meritocracy, Donald Trump. Anyway, I digress. But they're foolish, he says, right? You're dumb and foolish for not agreeing to do the thing he told you they would never do, that he told you Kamala would do should you not elect him. You're foolish, clearly foolish. Well, let's make a point about this. He does this often. Here's where he said when you cared in 2016 that he might shut down the entire internet because, that would be a violation of your constitutional rights. What'd he say? You're foolish.
Because we're losing a lot of people because of the internet. And we have to do something. We have to go see Bill Gates and a lot of different people that really understand what's happening. We have to talk to them, maybe in certain areas, closing that internet up in some way. Somebody will say, oh, freedom of speech, freedom of speech. These are foolish people.
Ah, yes, foolish people. No, just people who understand their rights. You're wrong, and you don't care. It's foolish because they don't like what you had to say. That's what it comes down to. It would be a violation of your rights. Working with Bill Gates, I'm sure that works well for the conservatives today. On top of the fact that that's literally where we're about to get to, guys. He was literally proposing the very general idea that they're now enshrining with these platforms through biometric surveillance and verification. How long until everybody starts to realize that you were played? This guy quite literally is what Jones has always pretended he was fighting. Everything. And it's not just him, guys. It's just the larger picture of our government. Same point about the burning of the flag, which is undeniably enshrined by the Constitution. The Supreme Court has roundly upheld. It is your legal right to burn any flag that you want. It's considered free speech. Now, when it came up again, and remember, Ron Paul made this point, plenty of others that Trump pretends he supports. So he comes out and says, you're stupid for thinking that that's a crime. Or that you're stupid for thinking that should be, that is constitutionally protected.
Flag down. They were writing Hamas on the bell outside of Union Station. What does a Donald Trump do if he takes office to these people on the street?
Rarely have we seen anything like this.
As always, not new. It's not even that rare. It's something that happens all the time in this country and all around the world, but bombastic Trump, as usual.
And I think you should get a 1-year jail sentence if you do anything to desecrate the American
desecrate. Because obviously it's a religious symbol, right? Because that's what that word means.
Flag. Now, people will say, oh, it's unconstitutional. Those are stupid people.
Yeah.
Those are stupid.
You're stupid for understanding that is your right. I mean, how many times you can't acknowledge this stuff or you can't deny this stuff if you're an honest person? That's wild. And so here he is again. You're stupid and foolish if you think that this is a bad thing, even though I told you it was a bad thing right before you put me in this position, or if that's how you believe this. Now, this is at the end of this thread. I'll include both those links for you. Don't forget, this is at the end of a thread of a whole bunch of links of Donald Trump telling you in 2024 that he was going to fight for Israel against you. It's funny how often I tried to make this reach people, but and here we are, and it still doesn't even get reach. That's the only reason it gets this much reach is because I literally like and reshare this like every third day because I point to it and just forcing it in and getting 3 more likes every day. This platform is aggressively suppressing everything we're doing, and we'll point that in a second. Now, before we get to the biometric part of it, Trump is considering a plan to punish some NATO countries by moving U.S. troops out of the countries which he deemed unhelpful to the Iran war. I just want to point this out really quickly, that this is interesting to me, that understand the NATO point. You understand what he's trying to argue here, right? Is that NATO should have been there to support his war. Why? Because NATO, because, attack one, attack all. Oh, yeah, but you forgot the main part. They did not attack you. You attack them. And so Trump is just frustrated that he thought, and this is what I argue yet again, just like I've been telling you guys, that it's my opinion that Netanyahu likely fooled Trump by telling him, do this, follow our lead. Iran is a monster and they'll bomb everybody and they'll bomb the strait and they'll shut it all down and then the whole world will be with you. They didn't do that because they're not stupid and they're not belligerent like you are. My opinion. Doesn't mean good guy, bad guy. Just pay attention, right? So he also probably told them, we'll tell them they attacked us. We'll tell them there was an imminent threat and they'll all believe you and NATO will back you because NATO agreements. I'm telling you, these are all my opinions, but you see how this interconnects. And now he's frustrated by that because NATO's not there. Why would NATO help a war of aggression that you started, that they all called as such, for most of them did anyway? Doesn't make any sense. But Trump doesn't like when he doesn't get what he wants. That's the reality. On that same point, Trump is now announcing that a federal investigation will be launched into the spread of false and misleading ceasefire details. This is getting way more alarming in regard to the media side of this, because what he's literally doing here is saying that journalists can't publish information if he doesn't agree with it. I don't know why you can't see this if you're a conservative. I think most of you can. I mean is the ones on that fence, the ones being played by the team sport politics out there. The reality here, and we'll get into the down pilot part of this too, is that he's trying to tell you that if you post something, whether you, let's just say you post something and you did your due diligence and you believe it's real, and it turns out to be misleading. Well, he's going to tell you that there's going to be an investigation, that you will be charged with a crime. That's unconstitutional. But you know what, okay? He'll sell you're foolish for not understanding. Simple, right? But understand what he's talking about is that they're being called out for these lies. Now, even if it turns out that somebody claims something that was false, that's free speech, guys. That's the whole point. You're allowed to lie. You're allowed to say false statements. You're allowed to be incorrect. You're also allowed to report the facts that they don't want to be heard, that they then call fake news. That's all under free speech. So the problem is that he's turning this into national security, and they're all deceived. They want this to become a partisan thing where you get people on the Republican side siding with him against anything they say that they don't like because they convince it's a Democrat trap. It's lazy, and I don't think it works very much anymore. But it's happening, and they will continue to. There are already examples of this that overlap with I think it's actually with this case right here. Here, I'm not sure which one. I just saw this reported. I'll come back to the pilot real quickly. Cash just posted, FBI and our partners have arrested a former SOCOM employee who supported our top-level military warfighters for allegedly transmitting classified information to a member of the media. Now, if he were to transmit information to the media and it was divulging a crime, well, that's supposed to be protected act by the Whistleblowers Act and plenty of other points. They don't care about that. They put Assange in prison. They don't care. These are not the honest people in the conversation. They pretend to care about whistleblowers, then they attack them when they give you information that's in your interest. So I don't know which case this necessarily applies to. I'm sure we'll find out by tomorrow or today. But he's simply saying they allegedly, which he's finally learning his lesson, coming out and just screaming, we got the guy when you're only investigating because he doesn't know what he's doing. But now it's allegedly transmitting classified information because there isn't an ongoing investigation. But so we'll have to find out what that is. How much you want to bet it becomes national security? We can't even tell you what it is. So go shut up. And this is the reality of the authoritarian empire that we live in. Outstanding work by FBI, Charlotte FBI counterintelligence, as well as our Justice Department. It says, let us serve a message to any would-be leakers. This is what it's all about. We're working these cases and making these arrests. This FBI will not tolerate those who seek to betray our country and put America in harm's way. Okay, well, what if you guys are breaking the law? I don't know, off the top of my head, conducting an illegal war. So that means literally everything you're doing in this war is illegal. That's not debatable, guys. Despite the fact that our broken Congress can't do anything and there's too many screaming idiots in the political field, it's an easily provable fact. So in that context, if this person leaks something about that illegal war, then they would not be committing a crime. But see, they don't care about any of that. But I'm also wondering if it has to do with the point of this or a ceasefire or this one, which I think is more leaning towards this conversation, but I can't be sure. Overall, it's important to realize they're trying to chill reporting. They're trying to make sure people second guess reporting information that would be important to you, Americans. But here's what he said about the downed pilot. Same conversation in regard to the censorship of the flow of information.
Missing, they basically said that we have one and there's somebody missing. Well, they didn't know there was somebody missing until this leaker gave the information.
Well, I don't know how you can, I'm sure he might be able to prove that, but at the moment, we don't know that for sure, right? We don't know that. For all we know, it was given, and this is what we'll get into in a second, in fact, which I'm sure you already know, which I'll just say it right now. It was an Israeli who leaked the information. It was from Israeli media. So guess what happened now? After he says, we're going to get him. Turns out it's Israeli, and they all just get quiet about it. No one talks about it anymore, and we've all moved forward. Watch.
So whoever it was, we think we'll be able to find it out because we're going to go to the media company that released it, and we're going to say, national security, give it up or go to jail.
Oh, okay. Well, you see what he just said right there? He went to the media group and said, give up your source or you're going to go to prison. That's a crime. Or at the very least, a violation of their constitutional rights, which is essentially in the same conversation. That's not how this is supposed to work. The moment you cross that line, which they've done before, in more obtuse, kind of like abstract ways, he's flat out telling you, give us your source or we're going to put you in prison. That's protected journalism right there. It doesn't matter to him, guys, and none of it matters. The flag burning, the internet, anything he wants to do, you're stupid if you don't agree with him because he's Trump and he knows. That's how he looks at this stuff. Rights don't seem to matter. Why are we even confused about that? Look at what ICE is doing. Look at the 2 Americans shot in the street. Are we even debating that this guy cares at all about what he pretends to care about? If you're not paying attention, I can't help you. So he's telling you we're going to go after these people.
And we know who, and you know who we're talking about.
So I haven't seen what it's like in a movement from that point, but I guarantee they're trying to pressure something. And then it became clear that it was an Israeli, which is very roundly discussed. And so I haven't heard anything since then, but it has been a long period of time. How much you want to bet that you never hear anything more about it? Just like when Tom Abramovich from the Israeli government got caught trying to rape children in the United States from a sting operation, they just sent him back to Israel. What's crazy about that is how little conversation that truly got. Let's see if I can get it to pop up. I thought it was Abramovich. Let's see. There we go. There he is. Surprised it popped up. Israeli government official charged with soliciting a 15-year-old girl in Las Vegas. As always, it's funny to point out that right as we're doing that, I'm sure that there was trolls in the chat going, oh, you're making it up. It is a lie. And it's just, now, and then we'll still deny it once you get the information because the Guardian's a Democrat platform, whatever. It's just funny. You can almost hear the propaganda partisans out there, but this is a real story, guys. And he's never been heard from again. Went home, nothing. He was literally caught trying to rape these children, guys. That was the whole point. He set this up. I digress. The point here, where we here is that, the idea being that these, the Israeli leaker, I doubt you'll hear any more about it. Just make sure we go for full circle with the point. So here he is now, Patrick saying, 2 losers trying hard to deflect from a failed operation like despots attacking the First Amendment. So here's Crystal Ball highlighting what Carl Higbee had to say. And he said, and this has to do with the same conversation. The article says, Iran says U.S. airman rescue may have been cover to steal enriched uranium. Okay. And he says, because he's either completely stupid or deliberately trying to deceive you because he thinks you don't know the truth about it. He says, so Iran now admits, in all capitals, that they had enriched uranium? Weird. Trump was right again. 600,000 views. So many people thought, there it is, proof that Trump was right. And they're stupid, guys, because this is information. I mean that in the sincere sense. It's not an insult. I should say ignorant. But I mean, no, I think stupid's more appropriate because we're talking about somebody who knows the information is out there. But anyway, whatever you want to call it, the reality, as I can even show with the one that I've been showing recently, it's just the same point, or any number of previous examples. The Twitter fact check says Iran publicly announced that it had enriched uranium on April 11th, 2006. So if you missed the point, it's not secret. Enriched uranium has never been secret. It's about whether the nuclear bomb was the objective or being reached. The evidence does not back that up, and it never has. Enriched uranium is used for a civilian's nuclear program for energy. It's been allowed. It's been documented. That was what the JCPOA was about. That's what the recent agreement we'll come back to was literally about, giving up your stockpile. So think about it. Do you think that Higbee doesn't know that? That's alarming, isn't it? For people, these Newsmax, basically corporate media influencing propaganda. Because Crystal Ball says the sheer ignorance of these people is beyond belief. It's truly astounding. I said it could be ignorance or it could be willful deception, intentionally misrepresenting the reality to fool those unaware of the facts into thinking that Trump was right. Extreme desperation, if so, that's what I would agree. But this was the post from the International Atomic Energy Agency at the end of 2025. Yet again, as I've shown you many times, documenting the fact that the 60% that they are now, that Witkoff lied about or was too stupid to know he's wrong about. And I mean that because the narrative later came out that he didn't know what he was doing. I think that was about trying to undercut that they were deliberately deceiving people. But the director of the International Atomic Energy said that their inspections showed that the stockpiles remained under the safeguard in accordance with their agreements. And that was the 465 kilograms of 60% enriched, which was allowed within the agreement. So as always, for Witkoff to go on Fox News and say they were bragging about it, he's lying. He's willfully deceiving people into thinking that they were doing something wrong with what was allowed. That's desperation. That means they know Iran is not what they claim they are. Think about that for a second. Or I guess you could argue that they're somehow so bought into the State Department propaganda that they believe no matter what they say, they must be lying. I mean, either way you look at it, they're either deceived or deceiving. Now, on that point, really quickly from the pilot, before we get into the larger conversation of the ridiculous deals, Colin points out the CIA used this has been going around, the secret tool called the Ghost Murmur that uses AI to find heartbeats to rescue U.S. airmen who were stranded in Iran, according to New York Post. They say the secret technology was allegedly used for the first time in the field. So Shane writes, you don't build a 40-mile heartbeat detection system to confirm one person in a desert. You build it because you want to identify specific individuals. And to do that, you need their cardiac EM signature stored. How long have they been maintaining a database of people's heartbeat signatures, and how many people already have theirs stored? Now, this is really important. In fact, what he's saying seems to be the burying the lead, if you will. Like, people are talking about this alarming point about what they can do to find a heartbeat, and they're missing the real point, the database of this stored data. One thing I want you to remember that I've talked about many times, but it's always been a story that was relayed to me. I've never been able to verify this. And not necessarily I'm sure I can verify technology that exists in this realm, but as I've told you many times over the years, somebody close to me told me that they were they were at a work function with they were a salesman and they worked at overlap with people that were buying this stuff from a military perspective. And somebody he constantly worked with or overlapped with was a guy in the military. I forget the rank he said, but higher ranking. And he basically told me, and this was like 20 years ago. I think he told me the story, maybe 10, 15, but it happened to him a long time ago. And the guy was just casually talking about this, saying, working on this and saying what we're talking about is, and this is what I believe we're talking about here, that each individual has a like a fingerprint energy signature that is unique to that person. And that we can then catalog that signature. And if we know where you've ever been at one point in your entire life, if we knew where you were born, if we knew any point in there where we knew where you were and we could prove it, We can go to that location using this technology and pick up your unique signature and trace it back to wherever you are in that moment. Now, who knows if that's actually the case? Who knows if that was bombastic or whatever? But it always blew my mind to think about that. And his argument was we were just so far away from having the tech would only work for like a second and we couldn't get it to track too far. But now we're going 20 years later with all that's happening. And then I see the story and I'm going, oh my God, that's quite literally what we were talking about all this time ago, that you now have a database of specific heart signatures, energy, and that you can ultimately track them using that. Now, here's the question. I don't see a world in which, I mean, I shouldn't say it like that, but I don't think this is having this status signature and then just like opening like a radar system where it just hones in. I think this is about what I just described, using the signature point to be able to track it to where it currently is. I don't know how else you would describe that, but either way, all I'm saying, because again, completely just unverified information that I've relayed over the years in kind of a conversational sense. Seeing this, pretty interesting, isn't it? Now, that, by the way, is meant to roll into this part. This first was something I just saw today. Aaron points this out, saying, and this has been disputed, by the way, that Twitter is working on a biometric authentication to use this platform. Verify our identity to continue using Twitter. Now, I simply said, before I read what was responded to, I said, I can't confirm this. But I think we all know this is coming. And we all know this. I mean, everyone's talking about this very point, whether protecting the children or whatever it is. This is what we warned about. We can still stop this, I believe, if we realize the true enemy is the one building the digital prison around us. Now, by the way, this was misunderstood, I guess. I hope you don't take that as meaning that all we have to do is realize that. That's not what I meant right there, clearly, but that we can stop this in many different ways. But if we first realize that we're looking at the wrong enemy, in my opinion. And then I post to Derek's excellent article, which I might have right there. Yeah, I've already got it up. Entitled Oracle and the Rise of the AI Surveillance State Under Trump. You see in the background, I put on there, compliance is freedom. This is where we're going, right? And so this is a great article going over, basically, Derek's done great research over the years. And get this one for you. It pertains to this large conversation. Not too long ago, did one specifically focused on Palantir. Well before it was being talked about like it is today, even one before this, by the way. And showing you the invasiveness of where this was going, and welcome to the Palantir world order. Well, this one is the same kind of focal point, but using Oracle and Larry Ellison and all the other connected points are there. Very important to understand where this is all going. These are individual parts of the larger thing that is building around us. Now, back to this point, that's what we're ultimately talking about, is this kind of biometric verification pathway. Now, this person says pending community note, and this is just somebody who commented below saying basically because it looks like they have insight into anybody who's like is like a what do they call it? They work with the community note system and they're able to chime in. That you get to see these before they're actually posted. And they said pending community note says it only applies to people spreading what the CDC calls true misinformation, spam. So nothing to worry about. ID verification is only a protocol for people who draw attention to themselves. Point being, it's simply going, no. It's not just about censoring anybody. It's about people who were suspended for spam who can then use this to verify who they are. Well, all that becomes is, oops, we removed you because we're not sure. Now verify for us. It's like a backhanded way. My point is it could be used that way and it would be the same thing, whether or not it's initiated from day one or simply tripped to day two, right? This doesn't matter. But then on top of that, you got the guy from Twitter, Nakia Beer, saying fake news. Saying if it's ever released, it would only be presented as an option for accounts that were auto-suspended for spam. Well, there you go. He just confirmed the point for me either way. And now, whether that's the way it starts and changes into all the time, which you see happening, or it's just there for them to trip, should they not want, like what you're saying? Should you be talking about Israel? Suddenly, you got violated, and I have to give us your biometrics to come back in. We all know how this works. So I just want to be clear. He's confirmed that it is there. Now, he's claiming it might not be released. I highly doubt that. Either way, it is being worked on. So it is not a fake story. And it says it will use Face ID, exactly, which does not send biometric data. I disagree. And authenticates entirely within the operating system. So what? You mean the system that is completely compromised by Authentics in Israel and CHEQ and all the different platforms that are literally stealing your biometrics according to their own systems? I don't trust this guy as far as you could throw him. So either way, but it says there is a backup option offered when the device does not support Face ID. It's just, I'm not going to say I know where it's going to go. I don't believe that that's an honest answer. I believe we all know where this is likely to go. And every time in the past it's crossed this barrier, it's almost always ended up where these kind of statements turn out to be not necessarily false, but just, well, now there's a new rationale for why it's no longer has to be that way. Well, there's false flags, or rather there's people who are, whatever it is. Children are being bombed with pornography. We have to do it now. Whatever the justification is, even if real, will end up being used to drive it in like we always know, and it always does. Call me jaded. I think the history shows itself. Now, David Icke also points out that the globalist digital currency control agenda promoted by the anti-globalist, that never was Donald Trump. President Trump has said the current financial system, guess what, guys? It's outdated and will soon be replacing with a state-of-the-art cryptocurrency framework under the new structure bill. It's almost like we all saw this coming, It's almost like we literally told you it was going to be some stablecoin bastardization of it's exactly what we're worried about, guys. But I guess, calling it out. Okay, beyond the technocratic encroaching, just hellscape that we're all worried about, Iran and what they're doing here is a part of that conversation. I'm not going to focus on that through this next part, but just remember that. This is a part of it, whether through the Greater Israel Project or any number of overlapping points. I mean, even Catherine Austin Fitts is discussing this as a, sort of COVID 2.0 or whatever it would be, 4.0 in that same dynamic. Right? The collapse and rebuild and the whole same thing. And it's not just about pathogens or whatever you think was involved. It's about the justification for the change. And that's what we're all highlighting for the control grid. Now, Just a Thought came out and said, reframe your thinking. I really agree with this. From this evil man must be stopped to, and he's talking about Trump, she's talking about Trump, to the system that created and stands behind this evil man must be stopped. Because that system that created and stands behind him, that's left and right. That's the government. That's and what is over that. That's what, and this is not a anomaly, guys. This is the plan, in my opinion. And she says, notice how no one in a position of power, including the Democrat leadership, is stopping this. I mean, you're seeing Obama and Clinton talk about basketball and it seems disjointed. If this was what they're claiming, and it is, there would be momentum. There would be massive pushback, but no one's doing that. Meaning, I agree with her, they all want it. Now, maybe they disagree on how to get there. Maybe they disagree with how bombastic and obvious Trump is being. Doesn't mean they don't want the same agenda. As you saw, starting here, Trump said yesterday, a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. Now, look, there's all these very clumsy efforts to be like, he didn't mean that by killing sinners. That doesn't mean kill innocent people. It's like, God, we live in a cartoon. A whole civilization, but somehow you're going to be like, except all the civilians will be whisked over here and they're totally safe. But will the whole civilization, I mean, what are you talking about? I mean, at the very least, then you have to acknowledge that he's being wildly bombastic and talking about basic, what do you mean a civilization? You realize that one bomb wouldn't be able to do that, right? So this is where people went, oh my God, a nuclear weapon, but that wasn't explicitly stated. Either way, it's very dishonest to pretend that we didn't know what that meant. I don't even mean nukes. I just mean a war crime, a crime. So from that point forward, this was later on the 7th. I wanted to point out to people, okay, he said that. And then what did Iran say? They came out and said, quote, all diplomatic channels and indirect talks have been frozen after what he said. Now, it appears that at the very least that either Pakistan was still being able to relay things. That's why I wanted to point out in the beginning that they're not ignoring everything. This statement, I don't think, was meant to say that we're just plugging our ears and stomping our feet, because that wouldn't make sense with what they were trying to achieve based on what they said, which was an end to this, right? So this means to me that we're not negotiating. We're not engaging with your back and forth. But if you want to come and say, we want to end this, here's all of what you asked for, they're open to that. That's really important to hear, because I think that's exactly what happened. So, but either way, it's important to see that it wasn't what Trump was constantly framing this as, that he was somehow in back and forth constant communication. One dumb thing he said was some child had to run and deliver a note. Their carrier pigeons had to carry. These people are ridiculous. So the reality to me is that he is being relayed information by Witkoff and Kushner, and that has to say something. And so what we're seeing is, well, let's just make it quick on this point, is that ultimately the shutdown of negotiation from Iran's side, but open to hear what if they were willing to end the war. And then Trump is the one who's being misled, I think, by what he's being relayed from his team. Now, here's what Jesse Waters said. about the bridge bombing and all the different stuff. And I think this is important because the idea that this is somehow being rationalized by, Jesse Waters is especially juvenile in the media sphere. He taps into a very certain kind of person that just is snide and manipulative and just disregard. Like, it's just to literally make an entire segment about why it's not a problem to bomb civilian locations, even though literally everybody everywhere in all conversations knows that is a crime. It's just insane. But why? Well, because you didn't care when Obama and Clinton did it. I don't even understand why this is an argument that gets traction with anybody. Because even the person who's just blindly team player, you're essentially going, so now I'm okay that Trump is breaking the law. But it's not really what you're saying. You're saying that it's not really a crime, but even if it was, you wouldn't care when they did it. It's like this is Israel-style propaganda. Here's what he said.
They're back. The seditious 6 is now 7. They've got a new member, Senator Jeff Merkley.
And you know what? I mean, this is wild to me. You know what he's talking about? Look, I think every one of these politicians are criminals, but what he's literally talking about is when they stood up and said, it is legal to disobey an illegal order. And that is literally all they said. And they freaked out about it. And then Trump posted something on Truth Social showing a plaque that said it was legal to ignore illegal orders. It's ridiculous. Why? Because we know what they meant to do. That's not even a joke. That's what they were implying. They didn't just mean to follow the law. They meant that they wanted it. That's okay. So I guess we'll just assume that you know somehow what they intended to do. This is childish politics. And you're looking at the personification of childish politics. And now what he wants you to believe is now another one joined the seditious 6. And what are they saying? You can see.
He didn't like Trump's Easter message to Iran, so...
Yeah, the message that cursed, that said he would destroy everything and kill everybody. I mean, except for that was after the fact that he told you they were like about to make a deal and he was winning. But then he was screaming to do the thing that he said they agreed to. Like, if you were an honest person, Jesse, you'd laugh about that. And you go, that's stupid. And but that's not what you do.
He's telling our men in uniform to go AWOL.
Oh, is that what he's doing? Literally says to our military leaders, remember this. You are legally required to refuse orders to commit war crimes, period. End of sentence. End of paragraph. End of post. Oh, so what you're implying is that he means to go AWOL based on legal things because he clearly said the opposite? I mean, work that out for us, Jesse. How are you possibly implying that stating what we all know is the law is somehow him trying to get them to break the law? This is just dumb. It's bad. This is bad propaganda.
Oh. To our military leaders, remember this. You are legally required to refuse orders to commit war crimes. So what's a war crime? Alyssa Slotkin, one of the original 6, says it's as simple as turning off the enemy's lights.
Yeah, Jesse. I mean, let me spoon feed you here, bud, because that's civilian infrastructure. You can look it up in the Geneva. You can look it up in U.S. law, by the way. I mean, is this guy really this stupid or is he really this dishonest? Probably kind of both. Now, look, there's even the cyber attack point of shutting off their infrastructure. That's why they always lie and claim it was Iran or claim it was Venezuela, because it is a crime. Because why, Jesse Waters? You're affecting civilians. I know you don't care about that when they have the wrong color or you believe what Loomer says they told you or whatever dumb stuff that's going through this platform. I'm just absolutely blown away by this. It's not even worth more time. What they're trying to convince you of is that not a war crime, well, because I guess Iran bad, or maybe they're lying about it. Trump quite literally posted bombs and bridges and tunnel. I mean, it's just over the top. I'm telling you guys, there are more honest people, at the very least, people who don't want to be deceived, who can see right through this. Who, if Biden was saying this, if they were doing all these things, they would be burning the place down. It's just sad. It's depressing that there are anybody who are this dishonest in the conversation. I forgot I said that. I said yes, and this is what's important to laugh about, right? As he says, Democrats say Trump's a Top Gun fantasy, but America's winning. But they can't stop. They can't clap. Right. Because it's not, though. We're not, though. Higher government, more higher prices, more spending. Literally every promise ever made has been broken, even according to most Republicans. But yeah, Jesse wants to know they're just winning. You can't even be happy about that. This is a clown. This is a dancing clown. That's what he is. And the end of the day, or he might not even know that, but either way, is that the Sinister 6 added a 7th telling them to refuse orders. And he says, hit a power plant, a war crime. Really? Yes, man. A power plant? Yes. I mean, I don't even know why we need to explain that. And he says, Bill Clinton obliterated this. Johnson did that. Bush did. Okay. Well, yes. And they were crimes then too, you child. I mean, why, I don't know. It's not worth wasting more time on. But the reality is that people fall for this. They do. Yes, they were crimes. And Bush and Obama and the rest should go to prison. But you know what won't happen, Jesse, is your president won't do anything about that. Obama, Pelosi, nope. But you can keep dancing for us, though. Have fun. Assault Rod says, take screenshots openly encouraging attacks on civilian infrastructure is incitement and intent to commit war crimes. The Israeli politician, whose name is Randy Fine, says, happy power plant and bridge Eve. That's who we're talking about, guys. And that's who Jesse Waters supports. This guy's a monster. In case you didn't catch the joke, he's an American politician. Or I guess you can pretend that if you want. Here's Alex Jones on April 7th going, breaking video, breaking news, stuff they've been doing for 2 weeks. Netanyahu announces that Israel's bombing the bridges, trains, and tracks and other targets early ahead of Trump's... Laugh at these people. Laugh at them. You know why? Because if you've been paying attention, we've been telling you they're bombing hospitals and schools and everything. Israel has been telling you that because what did we tell you? They're using them to move missiles around. They said that last week. But I guess, breaking news, Jones, I guess, was told that by somebody who told him to post it, I guess. Do you just literally yell whatever they tell you? They've been doing it from day one. But I guess now his shtick is to gotta get on the game of, well, Israel's the problem. And guess what we've been trying to do? You call this blackfill. The game here, in my opinion, is him to get this to pass Trump. Even though he's screaming about Trump bad guy right now. Watch. I hope I'm wrong. It'd be great to have somebody else calling out the reality, even if he's dishonest about it. I just don't believe that that's what this person is. Whole career of dishonesty. But here's the thing. Here's Israel posting on that day. 8 bridges and segments utilized by Iranian terror cells. Actually, here's the point, though, just to make this even more clear, even that day. So he posts this. 1:44, April 7th. 9 a.m., April 7th. The IDF literally posted saying, hey, we just bombed 8 bridges. Which, by the way, yes, is important to recognize. They were doing this even though Trump claimed they were waiting. And I told you that 3 days ago, a week ago, every other day before that too. But so here's the funny part is breaking news. They said they're going to do something that they literally said 4 hours ago they had already done. You just can't make fun of these people enough. Okay, let's get into some important stuff here. Now, Dave DeCamp points out, now this is still on the 7th, okay? JD, and going back to the point about why JD Vance won't be any better. I mean, is anybody still pretending that? Tucker Carlson seems to think he's the honest one. Well, here he is yet again, as you already saw, by the way, we played this in the last show, holding the line. He says, I hope they make the right response. They've got to know that we've got tools in our kit that we haven't used. And so everybody's like, oh my God, nuclear bombs. Well, they always do that. And they very well could mean that, but they always do that. Trump we be hit with things you've never seen before, and then uses a bomb, uses another normal bomb. That's what he does. It's a game. Even this seems like it was a bluster to get them to try to capitulate. They didn't, so he caved. That's what I think ultimately happened. That's why he was stressing its whole civilization, hoping they might just cave. Dave DeCamp says, and this is what he said in the video, JD Vance, we want a world where oil and gas are flowing freely. Yes. So in other words, a world that existed before what you started. Laugh, guys. Laugh at these ridiculous people. Now, you can't keep pretending they're in the position of winning, that they're the ones controlling everything when they keep putting statements like this out. If you've now made the point that the entire agenda is to do the thing that was already there before, then you're a clown. Like in every sense, you are lying, obviously. You're putting forward something that you must know is obviously seen to be dishonest and is just, I guess, embarrassing. Right? I mean, the idea about we need to open the strait. Well, it was open before you started this. Gas and oil were flowing freely before you started this. And on top of that, he also said, I guess I said the second part first, that nuclear weapons, or at least insinuated that they might use something that was more than before, and people took that as the threat of nuclear weapons. So still on the 7th, what we saw with that threat of bridges and tunnels and the escalated civilization will end and nuclear weapons, right? Well, what'd you get? You got Iranians who went out to their civilian infrastructure and formed human chains on the bridges. And the way that people turned this into them being the bad guy, it just shows you how weak their position is. These are civilian bridges. Or, I mean, regardless, you're talking about infrastructure that is technically a war crime. And so what happened? They went out there and they stood there because the argument would be that they're illegal. They're not allowed to bomb. I mean, this is the equivalent of saying them standing in their homes is them wanting to be bombed by what Trump might do, because that's also a crime, right? And he's bombing their homes, and so is Israel. So that but that they go and stand on the bridge because they're trying to make a point makes them monsters. I mean, their children, I mean, let's be clear, the point they've all hyped on. They brought their children. Well, I've seen a few examples of children being there, but you also realize this is a bridge where people live and there's a world there and there are children. On top of that, what's the difference? If they are bombing them in their hospitals, their schools, and their houses, which is where children are too, what's the difference of having them with you when you walk on a bridge that's not supposed to be bombed either? It's a special kind of of sinister nature, a special kind of malicious hatred that's coming from the Loomers and the Randy Fines and this administration. And she says, this is today on the White Bridge in Iran. This was yesterday. And it says, Trump and Israel's criminal war has united all of Iran society, every faith, which is now what they're trying to avoid pointing out, which, by the way, was the reality to begin with. If you watched our reporting, if you looked at the facts, and they lied about it. I mean, you realize they're not even trying to talk about that anymore because they know that it spectacularly failed. They unified this country against them way more than it was before. And it was unified against them to begin with. And here's what you get. The classic propaganda. This is one of the most absurd Zionist propagandists on this platform. He's been caught countless times, just like this, just making things up. Of course, recognize that it comes from open source intel, another one doing the same thing. And it says, breaking, the Islamic Republic has begun forcing children to create human chains around the regime infrastructure. Their evil and barbarity knows no bounds. That's what they're saying. While you literally started this by killing 170 children in a school. I mean, this is just beyond the pale, guys. And you see these two children, but if you take a look at every one of these videos, you will find very few of them. But this is what they're pushing. That they're somehow forcing them? How do you even factor that in? Are you reading their minds? Did they send you a message? Jacoby? It's bad, guys. Bad. And then what you get 2 hours later, Eric Dougherty dutifully doing the same thing because that's what they are. The same thing. Propagandists, whether they realize it or not. Breaking, even though it was reported 2 hours ago, Iran is now forming human chains in front of a power plant. And it says they even invited children to attend. Oh, but realize he said invited right there. I'm going to keep that in mind. This is evil and disgusting. Iran views their people as meat shields. Meat shields? Because you're so stupid. Well, realistically, what we're talking about is people walking through open locations where they're allowed to be in a country that is their country, which is a civilian location, which it's just crazy. While you're watching Israel get caught probably, 10 times over the last couple of years using human shields in Gaza. Over and over and over. Mosquito protocol, neighbor protocol, literally prove it. These people just do what they're told, guys. Now, here's the next post where he comes out, 8 minutes later and says, just in, even though you just said it, the regime has flooded the White Bridge with human chain of children. And it says, these are children here. These kids have no idea what they're doing or why. Further proof the regime but you just literally said something different before. Further proof the regime needs obliteration. Now, I want you to understand, despite how their traffic and their influence keeps growing on this broken, ridiculous platform, everybody's making fun of these people. And I mean, look for yourself. Look at the comments. I'm not even seeing any support. It's just they're doing their job, and they're probably making tons of money doing it. Glenn Greenwald points out what Dropsite News reported about Israel's own Channel 13. They set up a countdown clock in anticipation of Trump's deadline to wipe out Iran's civilization, which is what they were discussing. Laughing and smiling. The same media channel that openly discussed why it was okay to rape Palestinians. I'm not making that up. You somehow were unable to see, they never saw that worldwide conversation. I think you should ask why that is. They got caught raping people in the said team in prison, and then they went on air and told people that was what was supposed to happen. That's what's our right to do. I'm not making that up. Same channel. As they cheer on the end of their civilization in Iran. And it says the purest faces of the core mindset of the Trump administration, Glenn writes, are Mark Levin, Laura Loomer, Lindsey Graham, and the genocidal monsters who regularly inhabit mainstream Israeli television. And that's what you get. Now here is Furkan Gazurka pointing out what Fox News was saying. That's the same point. Absolute insanity. The hosts are furious that Iranian women and children are forming peaceful human chains to protect their civilian plans from the Trump administration. They literally call Iranians sick and evil. Not that Trump might bomb that bridge full of civilians, but that they just stand there. Guys, this is insane to me. Like, this is a level that I've never seen before. And maybe it's just when I was younger, when it was happening in other time frames, but my God, this is desperation. People are seeing through this. The world is turning. This is changing things. I'm trying to get an IMA panel going about this kind of point, about the kind of facade of the deal making, but really more so how Iran and the Strait and how they've broken all, like Trump administration and Israel have clumsily like stumbled through this, and how that seems to have changed the global dynamic a little bit. See if that gets going. Now, bringing this forward to, actually one more point before we go to pretty much the next day, which is right here. I want to point this out as well, that you have, and it's not just about this guy. He just was the one, for some reason, this is the one that keeps popping up in my feed, even though I don't follow him. And I'm talking about on the part where I follow. Like, it's not, you all know this. I don't even need to stress it. This platform shoves these people in your face on either side, for you or for either one, regardless of whether you follow them and regardless of whether you block them even. For the longest time, I was getting that absolute moron, Matt Wallace, every day, even though he has me blocked. This platform is trying to manipulate you with these people. My point, though, is that he's the one that I saw. That's why it's being shared to make the point. But you got Nick Sorter and Benny Johnson and all the same people doing the same red light flashing, breaking news, idiot stuff. He says Air Force B-52, Stratofortress bombers just took off from the United Kingdom that could reach Iran by the time President, who knows if that's the point. It's not whether he's even he's arguing that they had just taken off these bombers. Well, that didn't happen. They didn't bomb, but I'm sure if Trump wanted to stress the threat, he probably did that. My point, though, here we go, Iran should cave now. And every other post they're making, like cheering this on like it's some glorious moment for our country. So regardless of, hypothetically, had they literally nuked Iran, had Israel done it knowing they could have blamed Trump, had Trump done it because he's belligerent, what do you think they would have done? What do you think Eric would have done? Are you going to pretend like he'd go, oh no, they would go, Trump saved the day, Trump killed the regime. They would be cheering on one of the most horrific things you've ever seen. How do you not see that? They're literally going, do it, cheer it on. And now that it doesn't happen, it's almost as if they're like bragging about how that was never the plan and Trump was always going to make a deal. These people will say anything that gets the reach. But I said, regardless of what happens next, and this applies to however this goes next, please take note of all the pretenders like Eric who cheered this on the entire way. Things that the very MAGA movement were just pushing back against. These people are not MAGA. These people are blind statists supporting whatever the government tells them to do. And half the time, that's what Democrats want too. And they probably don't even realize that. And this person's same post simply saying, is this you? Here he is saying in 2025, we'd be at war with Iran directly if Kamala won. Just think about what we avoided. We should have already signed off on several strikes and probably would have sent troops. It would have been a nightmare. Yep, that's him. Now he's cheering on the same thing. Now, BBC posted this in regard to the nuclear threat. And it says, it was a quote. Radin, also they're claiming a random 20-year-old in Tehran. I'm willing to bet you he doesn't even exist. Or Israel claimed they had the information and BBC reports it because what Israel says is taken as fact from these broken platforms. Quote, about them hitting energy infrastructure, using the atomic bomb and leveling Iran. He says, quote, my honest reaction is that I'm okay with all of these. They really want you to believe that this Iranian who loves their country and wants to see the country thrive is like, yeah, bomb us with a nuclear bomb, which will destroy the entire area, which will destroy Iran for however long it will, whatever you believe the reality is of how long nuclear energy, or if you even think it's real, the point is the complete destruction of everything that's Iran, like Trump threatened. And you want us to believe that he was like, yeah, do it because bad guy Iran. This is my point about the same thing I like a reverse about the MAGA movement. If you believe that the MAGA movement, for example, would be okay with Trump bombing Republicans or bombing MAGA locations under the argument that it will lead to MAGA controlling the country. That's the equivalent of this. And they're going, yeah, bomb us, because it'll help us get where we want to go. Because what we're talking about are places where Iranians are, not just pro-Iranians of the government. This is, and here's where this goes. They deleted it. It says it's a huge journalistic scandal. The BBC published an obviously shocking purported quote from a 21-year-old in Tehran saying he would be okay if he nuked the country, then silently removed the quote. which tells me it was a lie. Even more so because the pro-war activism of this reporter, who turns out to be somebody who is a blind Israel supporter. Who knew? It says not only has the BBC refused to provide any explanation of why they removed it or where it came from, but the person who, in the byline who actually wrote it, as odd, blocks anyone who asks her about it. What do you know? And here's the person they're talking about, the prior regime change and Shah loyal activism of the reporter in question. It says, before joining the BBC, the person who wrote the article right there was an employee of Marjan TV Network. It's a parent company of basically a pro-monarchy network with the mission of glorifying Pahlavi regime. This is how this stuff works, guys. Yeah, bomb us, murder us, nuke the country because free, right? Okay, now with that absurdity in your mind, look at this ridiculousness Gunther Eagleman is posting. Now look, I'm willing to bet you these are people in the United States cheering, but you realize there's a huge propaganda network of people who have been like aggressively, the MEK rallies, the people we've always talked about, who they just send out. Here's what they're saying. And you tell me this is not North Korea vibes.
Thank you! Thank you! Thank you! Thank you! Thank you! Thank
you! They're saying, thank you, Trump! Seriously?
You! Thank you! Thank you!
And every one of them are holding pictures of Pahlavi and the Shah flag. I mean, it's just embarrassing, guys, because people support that. There are people that support this or are misled. There's always pretty much every category. But the reality of this is it's a wildly propagandized conversation. The vast majority of Iranians do not support this. And the reality of the Shah, as you can look up for yourself, if you want to read the history, ask Grok, whatever you think, other than listening to idiots on Twitter, is that this was a horrible situation, according to every source. It's like documented source of the history. It was an oligarch that only the pro-Shah Iranians and U.S. and Israeli elitists were at the top, and they lived like kings, and the vast majority of Iranians were in squalor. People tortured, people by the, was it Savik? The police they created. I mean, it's just all very obvious history. And these people either don't know that or are not honest and are there fighting for the government. I mean, it's just, but even the idea that Trump, I mean, it just is too much. It is, you believe it you want. To me, that seems like a cartoon. Now, Hassan Mafi also points out, right, the Iranian people want to be bombed, as Trump said. Literally, they want to be bombed. That's what he said. And here's those Iranian people protesting, going, I want to be bombed. Yes, now, okay, because they have a Star of David does not therefore mean that they're dishonest, does not therefore mean that they are lying or fighting for something other than Iranian people, but it sure as hell shows you an overlap that relies not with Judaism, with Zionism. The Star of David is not a Judaism symbol, it is a Zionism symbol. The sign of Judaism is the menorah. The Star of David is a Zionist symbol created by Herzl and the Zionist movement that they've then conflated with Zionism. Easy to look up. So these people are not on the side of Iranians. They're on the side of the Zionist Iranians that are fighting to destroy Iran, for the MEK, for the Shah. Easy to look up, guys. But we're being gaslit. Like every other conversation that I hope Americans are fully starting to understand. Now, what are you getting? Toward the middle of the 7th? Well, U.S. Ambassador Walls comes out and goes, Iran is hiding military hardware in hospitals, schools, civilian neighborhoods, and okay. And as Tehran Tag points out again, it's almost like we've heard all this before. We have. This is the shtick. It's the rigmarole. It's what they do. They've already, I mean, if this was the case, why wouldn't they have said this about the school that they've now admitted they bombed? They didn't. They just kind of acted like it was sort of an accident or it didn't really happen. They left it undefined, but they killed 170 children right in the start of this because either Israel tricked them or they didn't care in the first place. Hegseth put out the map that showed the location within the bombing radius. You just can't deny this anymore. The map of their bombing pattern. So my point is, coming out and doing this was just about trying to set the table for whatever they needed to do, not just yesterday, but as it goes forward. No matter what they do, they're going to go, yeah, terrorism. That's what they do. Now, let's also not forget that Walls was the guy quite literally that got caught using a Israeli intelligence app in the White House, in inner circle conversations, which it got inappropriately deemed Signalgate. I argue that was the media's way to basically hide the point, which was it wasn't Signal. He was using telemessage. Look it up. It's an app created by Israeli intelligence to archive Signal. He's in there using an intelligence app for Israel to archive their signal conversation, and then he gets moved to an ambassadorship and get him out of the picture. If you haven't caught on by now how completely compromised this administration is or this government, you're not paying attention. It's not hyperbole. It's not conspiracy theory. It's in your face. And people are lying about it. I mean, for crying out loud, the guy who literally called us black-pilled, who's been shilling for these things his entire career, Alex, is now literally telling you Israel's the problem. And I'm telling you, it's not honest. My gut is he will pull the punch when it matters. But they're being forced to do it because they know you see it, guys. So if you're on the fence, just look at the evidence. It's there. Now, the point when this came out, I'll play this clip from Fox News, is where I started early on was like, okay, this is just like every other time. Where he came out and he made his big statements and nothing happens and it pushes it later and Iran's going, we're not even talking to you right now. So if you were going to base it off what's happened thus far, you would immediately lean in. It would be more likely to you that this was bluster and lies based on what we can prove before. But how it ended up now seems to add a little more layer to it. But as I said, it seems as if this was essentially an extension of exactly what I was thinking right here. And you'll see what I mean. So first, play the clip. Here's what Fox News put out about what, Trump called him and told him what he wanted you to tell the people.
I just got off the phone with the president, and he called, and I said, listen, if you were to put odds on it, what were the odds that this is going to end up being a negotiated deal? He said he wasn't going to put odds on it, but he said 8 p.m. is happening. That's what he said. What
does that even mean? So 8 p.m. is happening. Well, that would mean we're definitely going to bomb. Well, that's not what happened. So he lied or whatever else, guys. I mean, it's why do you even listen to this stuff? Same thing the other channel did. Well, Trump called me and told me what turned out to be false.
He said, if we get to that point, there is going to be an attack like they have not seen. Now, he's sticking to that at this point.
And my argument is that they didn't fall for it. So what he had to do was find a way out of this, right? Because he had to essentially find another path to make it look like he was the one that won. Because Trump, if you ever have known him, if you ever understood who he is, cannot allow that. Of all things, the Mr. Dealmaker cannot allow it to look like he got one up by the group he's been screaming, he's been beating the entire time. I just don't think he's capable of that. So he had to find a way out of it, which was to make the argument that they essentially gave him everything he wanted, when in reality, it seems he gave them, or at least pretended to give them everything they wanted.
Now, he said if negotiations move forward today and there is something concrete, that could change.
By the way, we'll get into the actual conversation of the points forward. We're already beyond that. It's already being shown that this has been broken. But they're acting like we're planning the 11th, I guess, is the day they're supposed to negotiate further. It's already been broken. It's already gone. In fact, I'm sure more has happened over the last hour. We'll get to that in a second. So my point is just to understand in your mind already that this carried into a point to where they already said U.S. and Israel have already broken the deal. It's already broken. We're done. And I don't even know why in any world they would ever, I don't even know why they would have come back this time based on what they've done so far. They go, yeah, let's make a deal. And then they murder your family. Why would anybody work with people like that or ever even negotiate with people like that? So my point is that it seems something, but now, as we'll get to in a second, not much longer, to be honest, I don't see a world in which they would ever come to the table again.
But at this hour, he didn't want to put odds on it, but he said it is moving forward with the plans that we have. That's a huge deal. And obviously, we all think that it's a thing that he's putting out there to say, don't do this. He says he doesn't want it.
What are you talking about? You're threatening nuclear war, or at least an attack like you've never seen before, to don't do what? What? What are you talking about? To Iran to not do what? That doesn't even make sense because they're the ones waiting to finish this. If you were to finish, this would be done. If you're going to make it about a nuclear bomb, let's just stop with this tired game. It's not the reality. Whether you think it's because they have never saw it or because Trump told you before that they obliterated it. These people are ridiculous. But yeah, he wants to use this threat that everyone's afraid of to get himself to stop, Israel to stop. It just doesn't line up in any way.
Do it, but he is at this hour sticking to it and saying it might be likely if they don't.
So what you're getting is Fox News helping the propaganda campaign. So if Iran's watching, oh, it seems real. It seems like he's real serious. You better make a deal because it's coming. That's what I get. That's what I sense from that effort. So I simply said at that point, I still feel like this is desperate bluster. That at this point, Trump was basically just trying to yell as much as he can about attacking in hopes that Iran would just back down out of fear. And so I more so worry at that moment about Israel taking advantage by carrying out an attack that's ultimately blamed on Trump, or that Trump is not in control. Because realize how easy that would have been if Israel was truly wanting to accomplish that, to just do it. Everyone in the world was like, is Trump going to nuke the country? And they do it, and it would be very easy to just to go, well, we didn't do that, and Trump would deny it, and people would probably go either Trump or Israel. Either way, I said this is only happening due to the illegal actions of the U.S. government in Israel. That's it. The only reason we're even in this position is because of what they started, based on an illegal action, based on false justifications. Now, in between this, so right there, we're at the moment where we're coming right down to the wire of the 8 p.m. deadline, wherever, 7, wherever you were in the world. And I say every single time, because I believe Israel very much wants this to spin out and keep going further, both to get what they want at the expense of Americans and just to hope that they can just chip away at Iran a little more because they're incapable of beating them on their own. They bombed all over the place. They bombed Iran, they bombed Lebanon, and we'll get to the Lebanon point as we come down to the point of why that's a violation. But as Trita Parsi points out, on the 7th, Israel literally bombed a synagogue, the Jewish community in Iran, members of the Iranian Jewish community, inspecting what's left of their synagogue in Tehran after Israel bombed it on Passover. Is anybody confused? I mean, this is easily verifiable. It's a very big story. So are we pretending still about Judaism, or are we all finally starting to acknowledge it's about Israel and Zionism at the expense of anything standing against it? I don't know why that's confusing. It's 100 examples across the world in any given moment. Then, on the 7th, Israel struck the Iranian aluminum company, Iraq, it's the biggest aluminum producer in the country. Meanwhile, as they're claiming they want to make a deal, it seems Israel, as usual, is doing what it can to keep this conflict going, to reach it, to basically trying to drive the conflict to reach its own goals while using solely the U.S. military at the expense of American interests. So now we come to the end of 7th, where you get this report. U.S.-Iran talks are now centering around, quote, getting a deadline extension, not a deal, as Trump's deadline is 3 hours away. Well, okay, right there, why wouldn't you laugh at that? Trump draws the line in the sand, and then when you're continuing to argue that you want ultimately the idea is that you're claiming they need to do these things or we're not going to make a deal, and then you just capitulate, even like this, to say, well, we'll give an extension to something you said was thou shalt not be crossed. Well, that's just sad. And that's happened probably 70. I mean, realistically, I don't know, like 6 or 7 times where he makes a point, then it doesn't happen. He moves forward or acts like they reached out, and Iran's like, we're not even talking to you. So it's just become this game of the boy who cries wolf. The White House says Trump's response to Pakistan's 2-week extension request is coming. So the question is, and I haven't seen this flush out just yet, was that the way this went down? And if that's the case, did Trump send them basically going, let's end this, you can get whatever you want? Which is the only world in which I see them saying, okay, we'll give you this extension. And they very clearly said this does not mean an end to the war. Or did this not even happen? Right? That Trump says he's claiming to respond to Pakistan and the 2-week extension. It's hard to say. Now, continuing. At this point in time, I simply argued I was willing to bet with no insight that Trump simply made it up. And that still might well be the case, you understand, that he basically was making it as all up the entire time, but yet Iran, like I said, was still willing to end it should they give them everything. And so at the end of the day, Trump just kind of threw that bone and they said, okay, good, we'll end. We're done. If you may, and then they, as we see now, didn't even uphold what they said, as we'll get to in 2 seconds. But so I think what's interesting to think about is that he might have made it up, and that this is just Trump not wanting to look the fool, as we know he's very worried about. By pretending that Iran engaged, he can make it look like his deadline worked. Iran said no communication channels were even open at the moment. Now, as we know, more happened. But here's what's interesting I wish to point out, by the way. In the new media and the mainstream alternative, like at this point yesterday, I thought, okay, well, maybe this turned out to be wrong, right? Maybe this sentiment was wrong, even though it's clear it was just no insight. It's my thoughts. It looks like it, at that moment, I'm like, maybe it's wrong. It still might be right now. Now, what you get with the fake media usually is people go back and they delete it and hide from it. Loomer does it all the time. The point is that that's not what you do. Wrong or not, you stand by it, right? And the reality is this still has yet to flesh out. And I hope, well, whether or not, I stood by it when I said it. Now, here's where we get this point where it's come out essentially that there was an agreement. I'm going to go through this platform in a second. By the way, on this, never should you blindly trust a thing like this, whether it's Spectator Index or whatever else, who just post words on Twitter. I'm only using it as a reference point to remember because this is very, very open public conversation. But I'll also point out that this platform, I'm not even that familiar with it. As far as I've engaged with, and I could have just not seen them, is one that seems, what they post seems to be the reality of what's going on. But you should never take that at face value. Like, for example, the Spectator Index and others, I've seen them be wrong a lot. I'm not even saying that's on purpose, but I have seen that. Just my note is this one tends to be what is happening. But please do not take it at face value. Do your due diligence every time. Iran says it forced. This is on the 7th, about 6:40 p.m. Iran says it forced the U.S. to accept a 10-point plan. Now, this is what has been discussed from Iran's side of it, which includes the following terms: commitment to non-aggression, Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz, acceptance of Iran's uranium enrichment, lifting of all primary sanctions, lifting of all secondary sanctions, termination of all UN Security Council resolutions, termination of all Board of Governors resolutions, paying compensation to Iran, withdrawal of U.S. combat forces from the region, and cessation of war on all fronts, including in Lebanon. Trump says this plan is a workable basis. Now, we'll show you what he means by that. Now, here, the discrepancy is whether this is, in fact, what was offered and is exactly what was accepted. Because I agree, it seems wildly unlikely he would, unless he was just willing to give them a bone to make this appear to end. But here, and we'll come back to it, he did. He said very clearly, we received a 10-point proposal and believe it is workable. But it's obviously, it could have been a different 10 points, right? We'll come back to that. But so at this point, both sides were saying the same thing. Here's Ryan Rosbiani pointing out again these points, going back to other statements here with the full statement, which I believe we're going to do most of it in a second. And this was the actual post that was put out by Arghachi, the foreign minister. On behalf of the Islamic Republic of Iran, I express gratitude and appreciation for my dear brothers, Prime Minister, Pakistan, basically saying in the efforts to end the war. In response to the brotherly request of, and this is what's important to hear, not from anybody other than Pakistan, is what he's saying. Which is very important because Pakistan's the one that stated very early and all the way to this point that Lebanon was absolutely a part of this agreement. It's important to recognize that if that's the case, then that seems to suggest the 10-point agreement that Trump acknowledged was exactly what Pakistan relayed. You see, there's a lot of insight that shows you that this is what I think is the reality, but it's not verifiable at this point. In response to the brotherly request of Prime Minister Sharif in Pakistan in his tweet, and considered the request by the U.S. for negotiations based on its 15-point proposal, as well as announcement by POTUS about acceptance of the general framework of their 10-point plan. I hereby declare on behalf of Iran that if attacks are halted, that's important, that they would be okay with a temporary ceasefire. Okay? That's not what it says there, but that is what they stated repeatedly after this. So what's important to hear is that the 15-point plan was something they put forward a while ago. They said it was ridiculous. But they said because they've always been there pushing that forward, and that because, as well as the announcement by POTUS, you see, the public announcement to the world of the 10-point framework, see my point? So I'm not saying I know for sure, but what I get from this is that they weren't engaging, but Pakistan was still there talking to them because they're not ignoring the situation. And that when Trump seems to have capitulated to their points, they said, good, then we'll take it. Like, guys, that's literally what this points to. So I think likely this is the reality based on how now it's ended up, which you'll see when we get to in a second. As well as the fact that you just saw like 7 different examples of him doing that before we got here. So the obvious possible likelihood is that it will be another example of him lying about what happened, right? The tankers that never went through the strait, for example. So it says, by the way, you could argue again that he was misled by Witkoff and Kushner, as opposed to him just lying to you. But either way, if attacks are halted. Now it says for a period of 2 weeks, safe passage through the strait will be possible via coordination with Iran's armed forces, which is also different than what we're being told from Trump, with due consideration to technical limitations. Okay. So at the moment, and this is what I said yesterday, this was at the, I don't know, like 6 something. I urge people to show extreme caution and skepticism with all of this at the moment. One side saying Iran capitulated, the other side saying Trump caved. I'm sure more details will flesh out by tomorrow. And see, that's what we all should have done if we're honest yesterday. Everyone jumped out and tried to make their statement. You know, it's just, that's the media field today. But we were wanted, I was at this moment in time, I was thinking maybe I should jump on and do a quick post, do a quick, just a quick update. But I said, it's not even worth it because it's all up in the air, right? So what's the point of me coming on and giving you a bunch of hypotheticals that I think might happen? Even though that might be interesting to many, that's not what I do. I will always include my opinions about these things, but the point is about what we can prove. So I said, well, wait, I'll see you tomorrow. Let's wait to see more information. Just take note of all the people that will just scream whatever Trump is saying, or, it's so much of the conversation. So here is what this is what Ahmad Salman points out, and this is the statement from the Islamic Republic of Iran. Now, this I think is more fleshed out. This is the full statement, but I want to read a couple points of this. I think this is actually really important because this speaks to where they believed it would go about the 11th, which doesn't seem to be on the table anymore. Now it says, we herald to the great Iranian nation that we have nearly achieved, this is from Iran's perspective, all the war objectives. Funny how that's what Trump is saying too, even though you can very easily look back at what he said in the beginning. It's not even close to what they said they were going to accomplish. But it goes on to say, and that your brave sons have led the enemy into a historic impasse and crushing defeat. Iran's historic decision, backed by the entire Iranian people, and you could argue they're just saying that like Trump would, is to continue this battle as long as necessary until its great achievements are solidified and new security and political equations are built in the region based on recognition of Iran's power, sovereignty, and resistance. And see, what most people are seeing already, whether or not Trump capitulates, is that what the current standing is completely inverted. They have, Trump and Israel have essentially created a situation where they are on their back foot. And I mean, I don't even know how they manage that. It's because I think what we were looking at is Israel willing to throw the United States at this just to get a little bit of action against Iran, whether or not it even accomplished anything. I mean, and at their expense, it seems. Because they didn't even step into this, right? They bombed a little bit, but they let the U.S. do all the actual heavy lifting. So at the end of the day, the idea that this is, you've basically given them control over this. Even though they already largely had it, you've now turned it in a situation where they are the aggressed, you're aggressing against them. And at the end of the day, I don't see how this doesn't end up with more power in their position, which is why we can laugh in a second about people actually like Trump's the winner and he wins. And it's just, I don't know how you think that if they ended up in a worse position than where you started with. But it says in this regard, and based on the advice of the supreme leader, the one that Trump says is ineffectual, living in the woods or whatever else, but nope, been there the entire time. This is Khamenei, the son. It says, and the approval of the Supreme National Security Council, and given Iran's and the resistance's superiority on the battlefield, the enemy's inability to carry out its threats despite all its claims, that's very true, by the way, and the official acceptance of all the legitimate demands of the Iranian people, it has been decided to hold negotiations in Islamabad to put the final touches on the details. And essentially what they're of the mind is just the fully committing to the points they're demanding. Because as I've been showing you, they're not willing to negotiate. They were saying, this is what we demand, and until you give us that, we're in this position. Trump's the one pretending they've been going back and forth. You get my point? Now, this is what I believe is the reality, based on largely most of the evidence, but it still could be, there could be more to it, for example. My point, though, is that this was simply them going, good, okay, now we'll wait 2 weeks to let it calm down. We'll meet you here, and we'll nail this down based on your capitulation to what we demanded. And after completing the final touches on the details of Iran's victory, see, as they're framing it, on the battlefield, political negotiations can begin. In this context, Iran has rejected all plans presented by the enemy. See my point? You're not hearing this because the left, right, corporate media, mainstream alternative, they're not telling you this stuff. They have rejected all plans presented by the enemy and has put forward a 10-point plan submitted to the American side via Pakistan. You see, that's from before. That's not this last back and forth. They've already given them what they demanded, and Pakistan is related. It's already been there. It's emphasizing key points such as organized passage through the Strait of Hormuz in coordination with Iranian armed forces, which will grant Iran a unique economic and geopolitical position, the necessity of ending the war against all elements of the resistance axis, which means a historic defeat for the child-killing Israeli regime's aggression, and the withdrawal of U.S. combat forces from all bases and deployment points in the region. The establishment of a safe passage protocol in the Strait of Hormuz in a manner that ensures Iran's dominance according to the agreed protocol. Full payment of Iran's compensations according to the estimates, which is what every other strait and canal does in the world. Lifting of all primary and secondary sanctions and decisions of the Governor's Council and Security Council, the release of all frozen Iranian assets and properties abroad, and finally ratification of all these matters in a binding Security Council resolution. Quite the terrorists, right? Let's make sure we enshrine it through the UN. If it should be noted that ratification of this resolution will transform all these agreements into binding international law and will represent a major diplomatic victory for the Iranian nation. Clearly. Now it says, or was that full, or was that point? Establish safe protocol in a manner ensures Iran's dominance. Well, it's important to point out that, before this, sort of the point about the strait in general, they weren't charging a toll. And even though they didn't technically have the, you could argue they weren't the ones that officially had control, they had security control. That's why we're here. That's what they always knew. They could have, in effect, done it like Trump does everywhere else. They did not. Apparently had no plans to until they started this war. Then they did this. So this is what you're ending up with because they pushed an illegal war. I don't know how you see this. I mean, it hasn't finished yet, but even this point where this is now in de facto the current reality is only because they did this. How you see that as somehow them currently winning is absurd. And it says these negotiations will begin in Islamabad on Friday, April 11th, amid complete distrust of the American side. See, they're not stupid. They know what's going on. And Iran will allocate 2 weeks for the negotiations. If the enemy's surrender in the field is a decisive political achievement in negotiations, we will celebrate this great historic victory together. Otherwise, we will fight side by side in the field until all Iranian people's demands are fulfilled. Our fingers are on the trigger. And the moment the enemy commits the slightest mistake, we will respond with force. And they've already shown that. Because right now, it's as I understand it, it's gone. Because Israel and the U.S. continue to do what they always do. So before we get there, here's just the post from the foreign minister showing you this is what he posted just to include it for source material. And then we might just skip this for time, but I mean, not that we're going long or anything. I wanted to be shorter today. But here's just the Koblesi letter. And I thought you could use this or any number of these kind of bullet point reports. I just thought it was like a quick way to give you like a general update from where this has gone. And also to maybe see some of the newer points that might have come out that we should be fully investigating to make sure that it's not incorrect. But this is the one we showed you, releasing their statement, saying that on behalf of the Islamic Republic, I express the gratitude. That's the point we're just showing you, that they are now, arguably in this moment of ceasefire. Because arguably the U.S. government capitulated to what they wanted. Because here's what, again, Iran says they forced the U.S. to accept their 10-point plan. So continuing, I mean, there's a lot going on with the market manipulations we're not going to touch on today, but it's crazy. I mean, if you just watch the statements and then watch the action around what Trump says back and forth, and half the time lies, these people are making billions of dollars, just back and forth manipulating based on what he says day to day. And I guarantee you, my opinion, that somehow that's being relayed to them. Whether they're in that room, Trump tells them on the phone, or somebody within that relays it to them. I'm telling you guys, it's a game for them half the time. Now, continuing. 2-week ceasefire plan. That was one I already read. Just going to get to more of the top here. So this says, President Trump says they'll be helping with traffic, which I think we'll touch on in a second. So now you're getting this ridiculous game where Trump, as Daily Beast calls it, Trump floats absurd fantasy to cope with Iran humiliation. That's a conservative platform, by the way. But he's simply saying that we're going to work together. That was yesterday, right? I mean, it's insane to even think that was nowhere in the conversation. So either he is being misled by his own people in Israel, or he's lying to you. President Trump says any country supplying weapons to Iran will face 50% tariff. What? So this is on the 7th, or excuse me, the 8th. This is at 6 a.m. on the 8th, right? So at this point, arguably, there should have still been some level of ceasefire, and he's threatening them with tariffs to say nobody's allowed to sell them weapons. I mean, this was obviously Trump did not want either. I don't know. You take this how you will. To me, that's not what you do when you want something to stop. Trump says Iran will have no enrichment of uranium. So right now, this is already contradicting the publicly posted 10-point plan that Iran put out, which doesn't make much sense if the argument, and realize only Iran has posted a plan. The 15-point plan from before, which we'll get to in a second, is like diametric opposite. So I don't see in what world that would have been the confusion, which is kind of what they're trying to say, that they were confused. To me, this shows you that at this point right now that Trump was being told there's something that was opposite of the truth, or it's obvious that he was trying to convince you that they gave him everything when the reality was the opposite. Yeah, and so now we get into, this is later, 8 hours ago, Pakistan Prime Minister issues a statement regarding violations of the U.S.-Iran ceasefire agreement. Violations of ceasefire have been reported in a few places across the conflict zone. I earnestly and sincerely urge all parties to show restraint. Well, we know what's going on right there. It was not Israel, or it was not Iran doing that. And this was the tankers passing through the strait have stopped. Iran says they will withdraw all the ceasefire if Israel continues attacks on Lebanon. Of course, like we told you, we knew beforehand. So last couple points here. Trump says, this is 38 minutes ago, NATO wasn't there when we needed them, and they won't be there if we need them again. Remember Greenland. It's big, poor run, piece of ice. What? Remember Greenland? This is just something so strange here. Who knows if this is just to distract everybody? I don't even know. The truth, though, NATO was not going to be there because this is a war of aggression. You started illegally, and there's no legitimate justification, whether under NATO agreements or not, for them to support your illegal war. This is just, I again think Netanyahu convinced him that everyone would support this, and he's just stomping his feet. That's what I think. Now, this is Trump again saying that no enrichment of uranium, like I showed you a second ago. And it says, and the U.S. will be working with Iran to dig up and remove all Iran's nuclear dust. This is silly. Trump also says the U.S. is discussing tariffs and sanctions relief with Iran, and then later goes, we're going to sanction all of your weapons. Doesn't make sense. If you're talking about relief, then why would you do that? It's just, that's, in my opinion, right there shows you this is still Trump knowing he's in the weak position, trying to force their hand. He wants you to think it's all success. We won already. It's already over. And then he goes, we're going to sanction your stuff and you better do what we want. It's like we saw before. They're making deals and giving us free stuff, but you better do it now or you're all going to die. How do you put those two things together to make sense? To me, it's clear that this is him trying to force them to do what he wants while telling you that you've already won. I said, if this is accurate, Trump's master deal is what Iran already agreed to before this illegal Israeli-led war. Honestly, I doubt that is what they agreed to now. Now, remember, the foreign minister of Oman had made it already very clear. So right now, if his argument was that we're going to end with a position where they don't have enriched uranium, well, they already agreed to that. They agreed it was happening largely, well, they're specifically controlled underneath the JCPOA, but for the first time, they agreed to give up their enriched uranium. That had never happened before. He came on here and said, we can actually, peace is within reach. Iran agrees to no nuclear stockpile, agrees to give it up. He was blown away by this in this interview. And this night, because it was the 28th, after Iran finally agrees, when they go, oh my God, peace might actually happen, Israel bombs Iran. And here we are. You just can't miss how clear that is. So now Trump claiming that he might, which probably won't, but might get what was already there is not a win, guys. At the very least, if that's even where it goes, that's a loss because you basically pulled back to what you were already going to get. This is interesting. So today, Israel says we weren't consulted. They were informed late. Israel's unhappy over the limited role. Wait, what? We remember just on the 4th, Israel preparing for attacks on Iranian energy sites, waiting for the U.S. green light. You know as well as I what that was. Trying to show the world we're just following U.S. orders, but the reality seems to be quite different. Now, even if this is just a narrative control, the point is that Israel has already shown very clearly that they'll do whatever they want, whatever Trump says, and half the time are able to basically control the situation. So now they spoke up and said, we're angry. According to the Wall Street Journal, Israel was not formally part of the negotiations between the U.S. and Iran, brokered by Pakistan over the mediating countries like Egypt and Turkey, suggesting they'd been sidelined. Now, this could just be trying to make themselves look like they're not involved. But part of me thinks this is what Trump is trying. He's spinning out. This is because right now, if he did offer them everything to make this, to give himself like a 30-second win, Israel doesn't want that. Israel does not want to give Iran even the momentary victory. So I think that's what happened. I'm completely guessing is that likely Trump did that. And Israel's like, what the F, man? And even if it doesn't go through, that's kind of how I read this, my opinion. It says, therefore, Israel was allegedly not happy when it received word that a deal had been finalized between the U.S. and Iran at a late stage, wherein it had not been consulted, citing the mediators and personal familiarity with the matter. Oh, great. Witkoff and Jared Kushner are the ones telling you, are the ones relaying to Israel what's going on. That's not weird, is it? Shouldn't they be dealing with the U.S. government, but they're like relaying in secret information to Iran? Yep, pretty much, even though it's kind of not what we're talking about. I do believe that's happening. Israeli strikes in Lebanon on Wednesday, which killed 89 people. So they've been bombing Lebanon, invading Lebanon, occupying Lebanon well before October 7th. It's a crime. I guess no one cares. Israel, which has maintained that Lebanon was not part of the ceasefire, has struck it 100 times since the ceasefire. Not a joke. Think about that for a second, right? So they deliberately tried to spin this out, which we're going to get into more in a second about this very point, being very clear that everyone knew from the person involved with relaying the deal, who was what's his, I forget his position all of a sudden. Yeah, he is the prime minister. I thought it's funny. I thought it was the prime minister of this. It's Sharif from Pakistan. Very clearly included Lebanon. It was explicit. And on top of that, as we're going to do in a second, they told you it's the same thing, that it is Iran, right? So the fact that they're trying to decouple it shows you what I've always been telling you, is that this was just a way to spit to Israel's achieving its goals at the expense of everybody else around it, like every other time. Now, what's interesting is here's Mark Levin when Fox and Friends is reporting the 10-point plan, because here's what's hilarious about this. It was put out publicly because Iran was going, great, they agree. Here's the deal. Because it seems they were told that, which is why I more so think that Trump offered that. And even Mark Levin says these 10 points are an absolute disaster. Here's what Fox and Friends says. And you've already seen these. The same point that we already read. Non-aggression. U.S. commits to no aggression against them. Maritime control of the strait. Nuclear program. Acceptance that Iran can enrich uranium for its nuclear program. In that case, it means the civilian energy program. But if they wanted something else, that's within the law, by the way. But they've made clear they don't want to. Not the point, though. Primary sanctions. Removal of all primary sanctions. All the same stuff we just talked about. End of resolution. Ceasefire. Okay. So he hates that. Levin hates that because that gives Iran what it, legally is required. It gives them sovereignty. How dare they, right? But here's what Caroline Leavitt had to say about the plan, which, you'll hear this for yourself and we'll compare it to what Trump said. And I don't understand why even she can't be like, wait a minute. Like, we all know what you just said publicly, Trump. You want me to go out and say that? Like, she can't because she's in no position to push back against the people who tell her what to do. But the level of propaganda from them, it's almost like they want you to see it. It's just embarrassing.
The Iranians originally put forward a 10-point plan that was fundamentally unserious, unacceptable, and completely discarded. It was literally thrown in the garbage by President Trump and his negotiating team.
Oh, except Trump wasn't there, though, because he wasn't. It was Witkoff and Kushner. But Trump literally threw it in the trash. Oh, they did, though, but literally. Good start.
Many outlets in this room have falsely reported on that plan as being acceptable to the United States, and that is false. With the president's
it may well be
deadline fast approaching and the United States military completely decimating Iran with each passing hour, the regime acknowledged reality to the negotiating team. They put forward a more
the team that they weren't talking to, by the way.
Reasonable and entirely different and condensed plan to the president and his team.
It went to Pakistan, as Pakistan said that it was relayed through them. Like, if we can't be basically honest about the most objective facts, this is what you get. Just stupid narrative control, which nobody actually believes, or the idea that somehow that they're decimated hour by hour, and they're just, if the point was you completely control everything and you've effectively won, then why would you need them to agree to what you want? That's pretty embarrassing.
President Trump and the team determined the new modified plan was a workable basis on which to negotiate and to align it with our own 15-point proposal.
Okay, so what we're being told is that they gave us another 10-point. That 10-point plan, that's the false one. We told them no, and so here's other 10 points. That then they somehow aligned with the 15-point plan. Keep that in mind, because there's no way this makes any sense, especially since it's literally the opposite discussion. And that we're not hearing about some separate point. No one's posting it. Only if this is the case, leave it. Trump, post the 10 points that you agreed to. How much you want to bet we never see that? Because I don't think it exists.
The president's red lines, namely the end of Iranian enrichment in Iran,
which they agreed to before you started the war, and we're already doing before that with the JCPOA, same old story,
have not changed. And the idea that President Trump would ever accept an Iranian wish list as a deal is completely absurd.
Not really. It's unlikely with what we've heard, but it's not absurd if you are lying to us about everything that's happening. And you're running out of interceptors, and Iran is totally not being decimated, and you just want a way out of this, then that is what you would likely do. And then lie to everybody, you might even argue that he's lying and behind the scenes going, just don't worry, I'm going to make it happen, but I'm going to tell them. And then Israel swings in and bombs Lebanon and Iran and spins it all out, because that's what happened.
The president will only make a deal that serves in the best interests of the United States of America.
Except for the fact that almost everything he's done in this entire administration that he calls America first has been for anything other than America. But I guess that this one time, there's no world in which he would do something that's not for America, except this time, that time, there, over there, every other point, Stargate, glyphosate, foreign policy, Iran war, but any other thing, it's just a stupid thing to say. That we just somehow know that Trump would never do that. Well, aside from all these other examples, but this is the game. People who already believe, who want to blindly believe him, will do so no matter what she says. If you're not a complete blind follower, you already recognize that's not accurate. And you probably think that's weird, and you should.
And he as a negotiating team will focus on this effort over the next 2 weeks, so long as the Strait of Hormuz remains open with no limitations or delays.
Right. Well, okay. So what happened immediately was that Israel bombed Iran and Lebanon, and that broke the deal. Right. But so what she said there at the end.
And he as a negotiating team will focus on this effort over the next 2 weeks, so long as the Strait of Hormuz remains open.
So long as they do what they're supposed to do. Right. So let's get into the next statements. So here is what Trump posted, right? And this is what's really important to understand. And he posted this on the 7th. So this is before they tried to, manufacture the narrative around it. He says, based on conversations with the Prime Minister of Pakistan and Field Marshal Asim Munir of Pakistan, and wherein they requested that I hold off on destructive force. Okay, so even right there, what you must understand is that's Pakistan who's talking to Iran, coming over here and saying, please don't do this. And Trump has been framing it the entire time as somehow that they're capitulating and negotiating. That's not what's going on. And it says being sent to Iran tonight, and subject to the Islamic Republic of Iran agreeing to the complete, immediate, and safe opening of the strait. Well, okay, which was what was already going on before you started this, and which they already agreed to before. But now, because of your repeated violations of the discussions, they said, well, now we're going to want complete control. Now we're going to charge a toll, which you guys created. That was not happening before. But so you understand that was one of their points that they said we're not negotiating about, and he wants you to believe that they suddenly just changed that based on nothing. Based on giving them nothing when they're not really losing. It doesn't make any just logistical sense, strategic sense. It doesn't make sense. And he goes, I agree to suspend the bombing attack Iran for a period of 2 weeks. This will be a double-sided ceasefire, which is literally the only thing that means, you complete moron. The reason for doing so is that we have already met and exceeded all military objectives. Guys, you have to laugh at that. You have the control of the country. You've effectively removed all of their government. You've removed of the IRGC. You have seized control of their nuclear material. You have, the only things you think you've done is control the airspace, sink their naval ships, which is what everybody already knew you would do from day one. And so you've done nothing else since then. You've just expended your energy. You've wasted all your munitions, spent billions of dollars while they're responding with $50,000 drones. And somehow you've reached and exceeded every military goal. Laugh at these people. And very far along with definitive agreement concerning long-term peace. That's not true. His very far along is to suggest that they're in negotiations. They're not. We received a 10-point proposal. That's what he just said. We received a 10-point proposal from Iran and believe it's workable. So if you're telling me they received it on the 7th, which is what Iran pointed to, and the next day, Leavitt comes out and goes, we threw it in the trash because it was unreasonable, then how do you explain that? On a basis to negotiate? But he's not even saying he accepted it. So all you need to see, guys, they're lying. Now, I'm not going to say I know for sure what the truth is. They are lying. You just can't deny that. They're not lining up. Their stories, like always, because I don't see how they can't get better at this by now, are not lining up. Almost all of the various points in the past contention have been agreed to between the U.S. So maybe this is Witkoff and Israel, and they're lying to him. And he believes that they were. I mean, I don't know, because that is insane and doesn't line up with anything we're seeing. So going forward, here is what and this is what's being posted as the comparison between the original. This is what allegedly being discussed by Israel. This is the 15-point plan, or I guess what, 14. And then here's Iran's one that we already saw. So let's just quickly look at these two, okay? And you tell me how, in what world this is somehow, these two things somehow joined. Iran must dismantle its nuclear capabilities. Okay, over here it is Iran is able to maintain its enrichment, okay? Iran must commit never to pursue nuclear weapons. Well, that's already on the table. It's already there. It was never even denied. It was never even disagreed with. They say, we don't want it. We never have. And Trump comes out and goes, they refuse to agree. So right there, either Witkoff and Jared are lying to him, or he's lying to you, because they have publicly repeated every time, and with previous negotiators, with the IAEA, saying, we don't want it. We're not trying to. So if he came out and goes, I don't believe them, that's different. But he comes out and goes, they refuse. Same point. So that's ridiculous. In what world would they come back? And it just doesn't make sense. Number 3, there will be no enrichment. Same point. They are demanding the reality of what every country is allowed. Iran must hand its stockpile of some 450 kilograms, look right there, of 60 enriched percent, which is exactly what was agreed to and allowed within their agreements already. So why would they give that up if they're saying now, here again, you have to really understand that when they were already at the table on the 28th, they agreed to these things for the most part. And now they're not. Now they're not on the table anymore. So Trump is effectively losing in the context of what he was demanding. If no matter what else you're looking at, they are now no longer offering the things they were willing to give up then. All you really got was an expenditure of billions of dollars of weaponry. Now it says the Natanz, the different nuclear plants must be dismantled. Same point. The International Atomic Energy Agency and the UN nuclear watchdog must be granted full access. Well, there you go, guys. That's my point every time. So you're telling me the very group that you keep telling us needs to be there is the one that already said they're not even doing it, as I keep showing you. That's the IAEA. That's what it is. So are you just pretending they're lying now, but you want them to be the guys that look next? You want to work that out for me, Trump? And it says Iran must abandon its regional proxy paradigm. You're talking about allies. The same point. They're never going to agree to not support allies like anybody else. I mean, it's just, that's enough. You keep going. These do not line up. It's diametric opposites. So how do you want to work that out? This person says the United States peace plan versus the IRGC peace plan. These are, I agree, irreconcilable. And they are already, and it says the IRGC is already violating the ceasefire. Of course. I have no evidence of that, like anywhere. I'm not seeing any evidence whatsoever of Iran violating any of this stuff. What you can see, and this is what I'm already going to show you next, or what I'm going to show you next, is that Iran initiated its responses after they were still bombing Iran and Lebanon as of yesterday. And so this guy comes out today and simply goes, Iran's doing things, violation, because that's what blind Zionist propagandists are saying. So remember that. Remember who these people are and why they're somehow incapable of recognizing that that's very manipulative. But here's what Al Jazeera wrote yesterday. The United States won a total and complete victory after agreeing to 2-week ceasefire, says Trump. Total and complete victory. But you don't control the country. You don't control the government. You don't control, but total and complete. It's just sad. It's very sad. Prime Minister's office of Netanyahu said the agreement between the U.S. doesn't include Lebanon, even though it literally did. So Israel just gets to define its own rules. It's just not always how it looks at it. Israel's leader, opposition leader Yair Lapid, has reacted to the ceasefire and says Netanyahu has failed politically. Iran and Oman will be allowed to charge fees on the ship straight through the transit. Oh, and Oman, look at that. Funny how we just don't talk, how our U.S. government seems to be aggressively misrepresenting everything. And of course, mediated by Pakistan. So here's what Trump put out this morning. A big day for world peace. Hours, technically, while he posted this, they were already breaking the deal. He says, the United States will work closely with Iran, which we have determined has gone through what will be a very productive regime change. I literally called this. So you're now arguing that you effectively were won and we did it because they're giving us what we want and we changed the regime. You didn't at all. You literally bombed some people and they put the new person in power who's the son of the guy you killed, who you all told us was a monster. And now it's good though, because there was, it's the equivalent of them changing their clothes and going, they're different now. We won. They didn't change the regime. These are all people that were in the previous government. And now they're still the same government. It's just sad. This is desperate needing of approval. There will be no enrichment of uranium. It goes on to list all the same things. But yeah, they won already. Haven't you heard? And I said, this is so utterly delusional and dishonest. It's exactly what I predicted he would do, essentially ending up back where he started, only now yelling he got us here. Only difference is that he's not back where he started. He's in a far, far worse position. Hashtag winning. And this is what you're getting from a lot of the people on the ground out there. Update, Iran has agreed to open the Strait of Hormuz for 2 weeks. Absolute masterclass by Trump. How insane. He's got the strait open without any help from Europe. Oh, he's so great. Wow. Well, as even Twitter will tell you, the strait was openly navigatable prior to the illegal war they started. Can you tie your shoes? Are you okay? Maybe just sit down for a minute. These people are just ridiculous, guys. And as Glenn also points out, some people are saying this satirically, because they really are. There are people out there using this sort of like, because it's that stupid. That honest opinions coming from blind team sport players are being posted by people making fun of them and not even knowing they're doing that. It's like The Onion posting a fake story making fun of them and that being the headline of the day. Like going, oh my God, I just made fun of that. That's what's happening. It says, but some of the dumbest, lowest, and most drooling MAGA followers, I argue they're not real MAGA. They're the people pretending to be MAGA. The people that really don't care about doing even what Trump promised, even if we disagree with what he promised. There are honest people in that movement that believe that those things would help a country, and that's not even what Trump is giving them. He's lying to everybody. So when we call them MAGA followers who are on the side of team sport politics, I disagree with that. I could be wrong, but drooling fake MAGA followers really believe that Trump is a war hero and genius for getting the Strait of Hormuz open as if it's the first time in history it's ever been opened. Just that's the game we live in today. And here's Bo Loudon saying, ships are freely passing through the Strait of Hormuz. Iran caved to Trump. God bless Trump, the peacemaker. Sad. When I said, so winning in this circumstance, in your eyes, is him getting us back to where we were right before he illegally bombed Iran? Except with Iran having much more control and influence? Okay. I said, are you really this stupid or just dishonest? Half the people responding are like, probably both. Here, again, Daily Beast, Trump floats absurd fantasy to cope with Iran humiliation. It says Donald Trump has suggested teaming up with Iran for a joint venture less than a day after threatening to obliterate the entire country. Speaking to ABC, and by the way, that would mean working with the very group, community, the government that you've all told us are terrorists? Huh? Speaking to ABC News, chief Washington correspondent said this 79-year-old president was asked whether he would accept Iran's charging a toll for ships to pass through the strait during the ceasefire, and he said, we're thinking of doing it a joint venture. It's a way of securing it. Also securing it from lots of other people. It's a beautiful thing, he says. Right, so it's okay that we give half that money to the terrorist group that we're trying to stop, as long as we get half of it. Anyone confused about that? This is just shameless profiteering, and it's at the expense of his reputation? I don't even know. Here's what he said today. After all we just went over, we win. This is his mission accomplished moment.
I stated in my announcement of Operation Epic Fury, our objectives are very simple and clear. We are systematically dismantling the regime's ability to threaten America or project power outside of their borders.
Which they kind of really don't do, which is just sad that they keep saying that. But what's funny is what do you say? Hold on.
Fury, our objectives are very simple and clear.
The game they play where our objectives are so clear, and yet every one of them will stand up and give you different sentiments about what those objectives are, or give you a different framing about how it would come to pass, or just literally say opposite things over the process of weeks to weeks to weeks. But every day they go, it's so clear. What don't you understand? They're all just, I guess that works for some people because it's not about it actually being clear. It's about them telling you that it is clear. So whether you understand it or not, you just repeat that it's clear because that's what I'm supposed to say. That's what I think is happening. It's not clear. These people are just just literally, what's the right word for it? Sort of Not spinning out, but the point is that every day there's a new response to a new statement from a new argument that contradicts what they said before. I mean, there's got to be a word for that, like a special word made up for this administration.
Which is now absolutely destroyed in America, or project power outside of their borders. That means eliminating Iran's Navy, which is now absolutely destroyed.
Which is interesting, seeing as how he's now said it's 158 ships that are destroyed. But he said 3 days in that we utterly destroyed their Navy with 54 of them, I think he said. So magic how that keeps going up, and it's always the entire Navy. But, I'm not even denying that they bombed these ships. What's just funny to me is that they continue to point to that, even though this was, it's a huge loss for Iran. I said in the beginning, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of control. But this is not something I argue they wanted, but they planned for this and are clearly showing the world that they are not losing this exchange. Even in the sense of like maybe targets in regard to naval ships or money lost, you can make an argument. But in functional control, in objective outcome, they're not winning this. And the bottom line is, as you can see, if they keep going on, the only thing that's happening is they continue to be weaker and weaker. They continue to show that they're more ineffectual, and Iran is in the same position. And in fact, it seems gaining influence and control where it matters most.
Hurting their Air Force and their missile program at levels never seen before.
While they keep firing missiles, and most times more than they were the day before. Look for yourself. They just keep going. They're running out of missiles because they fired less than yesterday, and then they fire more than ever the next day. Just keep spinning out.
And annihilating their defense industrial base. We've done all of it. Their Navy is gone. Their Air Force is gone.
The base of missiles, it's not true. Right now, what we just hear, well, they violated the ceasefire, which means they're still firing. It's just funny how we can't acknowledge that reality. Like, not even the CNN elements.
Their missiles are just about used up or beaten. Taken together, these actions will cripple Iran military, crush their ability to...
Okay, well, so if that's the case right there, why wouldn't you just take over the country, Trump? If they're utterly decimated, march in and take it, right? Clearly you're not worried about the legal realities here. You're breaking the law at everything you're doing. Obviously, the point is, not that I'm calling for that, but if he was truly in the position he's saying, this would be over already. Be done. They've got no defense mechanism. They got no Navy, no Air Force, no missiles. But you're going to tell us that you're just going to let them remain and maybe save some money on the straight? A child wouldn't buy this.
Support terrorist proxies and deny them the ability to build a nuclear bomb. Our armed forces have been extraordinary. There's never been anything like it militarily. Everyone is talking about it.
It's never, ever been anything like it ever before, ever in ever time. It's just stupid. And what's funny about it is if he made a statement about something that I argued was not the case, it would be kind of like, well, he's blustering, but it's almost becoming, it is a cartoon. It's like everything he's ever done in any situation is always the best of ever, and anybody's ever done in that position by a man that ever existed. Like every single thing he talks about. Well, that's not true. In case you're not aware of that, like this is not what he just said it was, but it just happened. It seems like you would at some point as a person be like, well, especially when I'm not winning, and especially when it seems that everybody's calling that out, the last thing you would want to do is go even further. Like we're winning. Okay, that's one thing, but we're winning more than ever and anyone's ever won in any war before. It's like it makes you a laughing stock, guys. And that's why I often, in this moment, go, well, maybe that's by design. Maybe that's being done to us. And I always really want you to think about what I mean by that. So, Lebanon. Last kind of two parts here to finish this is a huge part of why this was always designed to fail. And what do I tell you every time with Israel? That this is the plan. They did it with Gaza every single time. They did it with Lebanon before. They do it with anybody they're involved with, and Trump does it too. You can decide what you think is guiding this direction, but I knew this was going to happen. I brought up Lebanon right in the beginning of this. What did I say? I guarantee you that they will not stop bombing Lebanon if they come to an agreement. And that will be, I said that verbatim in a previous show. And so here we are, where that's exactly what's happened. As the post from the Prime Minister of Pakistan made clear, which everybody saw, which was roundly engaged with, it tagged Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and Rubio and everybody else, and it says, along with their allies, have agreed to an immediate ceasefire everywhere, including Lebanon and everywhere else. Well, no, they're bombing Gaza. They're bombing Lebanon. They're still conducting ethnic cleansing in Syria. In Syria. As Glenn says, how can Glenn Greenwald, he says, how can Glenn Beck and others keep saying they don't remember Lebanon being part of the ceasefire deal? It's because they're all a bunch of propagandists. He says they did read the deal as announced by the Pakistani prime minister who mediated and announced it, right? It says explicitly without the slightest doubt that it includes Lebanon. He's just trying to make a point. The honest response would be that Glenn Beck is either that bad at his job or he's simply lying about this. If you somehow are unable to look back at the basic source material, then you're bad at your job. If you did, then you're lying about it. It's kind of pretty simple, isn't it? Well, here it is also the Saeed Abbas al-Arghachi from the foreign minister of Iran who says the same thing. The terms were clear. The U.S. must choose ceasefire or continue war with Israel or via Israel, he says. It can't be both. The world sees the massacres in Lebanon. The ball's in the U.S. court and the world is watching whether it will act on its commitments or not, and includes the point about Lebanon being included. And of course, today you have Pakistan saying the ceasefire included Lebanon publicly in international settings. Okay, you've got the Pakistan defense minister attacking Israel today, saying Israel needs to be muzzled at this moment. The position Pakistan has attained will put to use to address Israel's aggression. You need to see right now, guys, from a global perspective, they're losing badly. I mean, from a not even necessarily from the front line discussion, but just from the momentum behind all of this, the world is shifting against them in this, which is how Iran, I think, planned this. Now, here is the first post I saw today. It was 4:42 p.m. This was Eastern time. The U.S. has violated the ceasefire agreement. The U.S. That's important because they're making the argument that it was the U.S. government specifically, but overall, it's more than just the U.S. So I just updated. Let's see what it says. Iran parliamentary speaker Ghalibaf, remember the one they pretended they were dealing with in the beginning, that Israel lied about in the beginning, because that's where that came from, and it's shuffled through the mainstream alternative media. I mean, they made it up, guys. They made up the mines. They made up all this stuff. He accused the U.S. of violating the ceasefire agreement. He said the U.S. has violated 3 parts of their 10-point proposal. The U.S. and Iran also appear to at like loggerheads. The bottom line is they have, if what Trump thought was that they agreed to the original 10-point plan. I say that because he may well have been misled by his own people. Dave DeCamp says, so after Trump announces the ceasefire, this was 8 this morning, according to the mediator, is supposed to include ceasefire in Lebanon. Israel launches what they called Operation Eternal Darkness in Lebanon and bombs the country 100 times over. So, right, you don't understand this, guys. That's not an accident. They don't initiate with a new title, a new forced effort in Lebanon. I think that's twofold. 1, to make the world see, screw you, we're going to do it anyway. 2, that we pretend it's something separate. Oh, it's got Operation Darkness, something different. That's how bad that's the laziness of their propaganda. They know the world, largely the control structures are going to back them, or at least they have for a very long time. And I hope that's starting to change. But that's what we're talking about. I'm not seeing Fox, CNN, anybody truly make this argument. Of course, here's Laura Loomer. And you have to understand, before we even point to this, here's even Times of Israel. Iran guards threaten response if Israel does not cease Lebanon aggression. That's the Times of Israel. Not that means it's true, but it's Israel is even making clear that, or rather the Israeli platform is making clear that Israel's violating the deal. And that they said, if you don't stop doing this, Lebanon, that will be the aggression. And here's what Loomer had to say. Iran just halted traffic in the strait. Imagine thinking you can trust a Muslim to keep their word. That's what this horrible human being just said. Human being is being kind. I truly, this is just a bad person. In every sense of that, the worst person I've ever seen on this platform, constantly coming out with the most vile sentiments to push her agenda. And so every Muslim anywhere in the world is untrustworthy. That's what she argues. They shouldn't be in Congress. Every Muslim's disgusting. It's got to be one of the most outwardly, openly, not even Israelis tend to be that clear in a public setting about their vile racism. She's being used, in my opinion, and she doesn't even realize it. But she is disgusting either way. She really does feel this way based on what she does and acts in the world. But I still think she's being used. And one day that will come around and she'll probably realize that. And she'll probably go cry on Alex Jones' show again. But she says Iran halted traffic. with no context, even though we know as a matter of fact that there was an agreement here. I said, call out this monster, first of all, both for how she's deliberately omitting the fact that Israel willfully violated the ceasefire by bombing Lebanon and Iran. So whether you think Lebanon was part of it or not, they bombed Iran after the agreement. And for her overtly vile bigotry and division tactics. Laura is the least America First person in any room she walks into. Please understand that. Let's see if that even got touched on. Oh yeah, a little bit. So Sarah Abdallah and plenty of others. It's not Gaza. There's family, it's a civilization, guys. They've got phones and cameras and media organizations, and everybody can see what's happening. Apocalyptic scenes in Lebanon capital. Israel launched 100 airstrikes in 10 minutes on the capital of Lebanon. Washington, D.C., New York City, London, wherever you live. 100 airstrikes in 10 minutes where your family lives. That's what Israel just did in Lebanon. As if that's somehow acceptable in any context. Striking South Lebanon, Beirut, Bekaa Valley simultaneously. Ceasefire or not, that's a massive war crime, but nobody seems to care in all of the groups that are claiming to care about international law. Iran warns Israel. Think about that. So in the midst of this, as they're doing it, they don't go, we're done. They say, we warn you. If you don't stop doing this, this will violate the agreement. I mean, what group does that when they want this to be a problem? This is them going, please let this be the ceasefire. No, Israel doesn't care. They keep bombing. Ceasefire threatened as Israel expands, Lebanon strikes, and Iran closes the strait after Israel violated the deal, but also all of them. The United States and Iran both claimed victory after reaching the agreement. Now, I think it is important, right? I mean, I guess either way you look at it, because Trump would do that either way, but we'll come back to the same point I made before. Just to consider the different possibilities of how that went down. And world leaders expressed relief, even as more drones and missiles hit Iran and Gulf Arab countries. Let me repeat that. Even as more drones and missiles hit Iran and Gulf Arab countries. Israel has intensified its attacks on Lebanon, hitting several commercial and residential areas in Beirut. I mean, that's just casually reporting war crimes, guys. Commercial, residential, those are all war crimes. At least 112 people were killed. Hundreds were wounded in one of the deadliest days in the latest Israel-Hezbollah war. Oh, man. Sorry, I just bumped that and highlighted all of it. In any case, point. They just said publicly they bombed commercial and residential areas. And then you frame that as their ongoing war against Hezbollah? You mean against the civilian population? You ridiculous mainstream platform? I mean, you have to understand, even as they're reporting this, because everyone can see it, this is how they still whitewash the conversation. The fresh violence threatened to scuttle what Vance and Trump called a fragile deal. The White House demanded Iran reopen the strait immediately and said Vance would lead the American negotiating team. Oh, yeah. You mean the team in Pakistan that's not going to be there because you guys are already violating the deal? I mean, if Iran ends up still going to deal with them, which seems to be shockingly out of their interest, it will show you who the real problem is in the conversation. Iran is still somehow willing to try to seek this negotiated peace, even as we know, and everyone in the world knows, these are not honest players in regard to the U.S. and Israel. Aggression towards Lebanon is aggression towards Iran, they said. The world sees the massacres in Lebanon. The ball is in the U.S. court, and the world is watching whether it will act on its commitments. It has not. Oh, here. Forgot I highlighted it. Now, it says Iran's foreign minister insisted that an end to the war in Lebanon was part of the ceasefire, as you said. Last part, Pakistan, which helped to mediate the deal, and others said fighting would pause in Lebanon, as you know, where Israel has launched ground invasion, which is not new. Despite Joe Rogan finally seeing, oh my God, they invaded Lebanon. It's been going on since before October 7th and well before that. Occupying territory, bombing, illegal invasion, even supposedly during a ceasefire. Before all of this, which they violated every single day and nobody cared. But yet we're all debating whether they're doing it now. It's stupid. Trump initially said Iran proposed a workable 10-point plan. And yet we're pretending that's not what happened. Now, the Kabisi letter says Iran's foreign minister Arghachi releases a statement regarding Israel strikes on Lebanon, telling the U.S. to choose between ceasefire or continued war with Israel. Drawing the line. Now, here's what Vance had to say. Let's keep pretending like he's not just a carbon copy of whoever's paying him, I guess, or however you want to look at that.
Seems to be a disagreement about whether Lebanon was included in this proposal, and the
Yeah.
Speaker of the Parliament, who you're going to sit across from the table from in Islamabad, has just said that he thinks negotiations would be unreasonable while that war is ongoing. So would you ask Israel to hold off strikes to allow some space for these talks?
Well, first of all, I know there's been some conversations between the Israelis and the leadership of our country today. I haven't been involved in that because I've been busy doing stuff in Hungary. I'm actually supposed to get an update when I get on the plane. But let me say a couple things. First of all, I actually think, and there's a lot of bad faith negotiation and a lot of bad faith, propaganda going on.
Yeah, like almost I don't want to be one-sided, but it's literally entirely you guys. I mean, it's certainly possible Iran can be lying about anything, but you want to point to one thing you can prove that they misled us about? That's not to say that they're not capable or they wouldn't do it if it's in their interest. I believe they would. But you have to understand, this entire time, Iran has made statements that then later flesh out to be the reality. Trump makes statements that we can later prove are lies, or Netanyahu and the rest of them. So the idea that, that they're somehow putting bad faith propaganda out there, fans, point to one. Show me where they've said something that they have not maintained. I want to be very clear. That's not to say that they're somehow the good guy in the situation. I don't think any of the governments are. In fact, I can prove to you that they've misled us, just like other governments have in regard to getting what they want out of a back and forth. But in this moment, in this exchange, give me an example, guys. Please prove me wrong.
I think this comes from a legitimate misunderstanding. I think the Iranians thought that the ceasefire included Lebanon, and it just didn't.
Yeah, except for literally everybody included. Everybody. Everyone in the room, all the mediators, which includes Witkoff and Jared Kushner, even though they're going to lie about it. Everybody in that room, including the other mediators that are not Iranian, have told us this. And you have Ghalibaf from Iran telling you that was the plan, and now all of them maintaining that. You didn't realize about Lebanon saying in Pakistan's own statement that was the case, which they all agreed to. I mean, they're being dishonest. Why? Because Israel's in control, and they're going to keep bombing Lebanon, and Vance and Trump have to look like they're not being told what to do. My opinion.
We never made that promise. We never indicated that was going to be the case.
He did.
What we said is that the ceasefire would be focused on Iran, and the ceasefire would be focused on America's allies, both Israel and the Gulf Arab states. Now, that said, the Israelis, as I understand it, again, I'm supposed to get a fuller report when I get on the plane, have actually offered to be, frankly, to check themselves a little bit in Lebanon because they want to make sure that our negotiation is successful.
Oh, and by doing that, you mean the 100 times they bombed them in between that point? You see how dishonest that is, guys? Like, really take a second to understand that. He knows what just happened. The whole world knows what just happened. So you're now going to stand there and tell us that they're easing and checking themselves, and that's evidenced by increased bombing campaigns in the most populated locations in all of Lebanon? Laugh at them. This guy's a clown. What you just said is where you should be laughed out of town for saying something that's still like we can all literally look and see, but that's not the world we live in because they're backed up by fake media and backed up by fake followers. People just yell, "We're all with you," and you're wrong. You think that you're a wrong propagandist. He's lying. Anybody with a brain, with a fraction of a brain, can tell you right now that he just lied about that.
Actually offered to be, frankly, to check themselves a little bit in Lebanon because they want to make sure that our negotiation is successful. That's not because,
other than government politicians in Iran or in Israel literally saying the deal was a travesty, right? I mean, you just can't make up this stupidity.
Because that is part of the ceasefire. I think that's the Israelis trying to set us up for success.
Oh, clearly.
And we'll, of course, see how that unfolds in the next few days. But look, if Iran wants to let this negotiation fall apart in a conflict where they were getting hammered, over
clearly.
Lebanon, which has nothing to do with them, and which the United States never once said was part of the ceasefire. That's ultimately their choice.
Yeah, even though literally discussed many times, and I can point to the examples in the past, but that's not even relevant. The point is, has nothing to do with them. Yeah, you stepped in it right there, Vance, because this is what they do. Now, whether that was what he was told to say or not, that was the worst thing he could have said. Up until then, he probably would have convinced a lot of people, and maybe still did. This is important. Because this is just such this is what it looks like to be in a position where you cannot lie your way out of it. That your lies need to be something that contradicts something you said before. And so you're screwed, right? Well, here he is. Vance says it's bizarre that Iran would want the war to continue over its desire to protect a foreign country, Lebanon. Quote, that has nothing to do with them. Meanwhile, official bipartisan U.S. policy for decades has been and still is, as they've told us, that the U.S. will go to war to protect Israel. That's a great point that I wouldn't have thought of in that moment, is that it's they're being hypocrites. So if you're going to say they shouldn't do it with Lebanon, then you shouldn't do it with Israel. It's always double standards. But here's the point that I think is more important. Every single time they've talked about Lebanon up until, I guess, Vance right there has been that it is Iran, right? That Hezbollah is Iran, that Iran is invading and that we have to stop that. Okay. And then when we talked about this in regard to the larger war, what did Israel tell you? Well, this is part of the same war because Hezbollah is Iran. So we're invading Lebanon as a part of the war. That's why they just changed the name of what they were doing, because before it was by definition, part of what Trump was doing. And they think we can't see this. They think that we're just too stupid, or they just not care because they know they control governments and media as the governments, not anything other than that, for all the people trying to trick people away from the reality of what's happening. Here's the White House account from Rapid Response with this little Marco Rubio saying they're behind every problem in this region. Okay, well, that's pretty clear. So if they're behind the problem in Lebanon, then why are you telling us they have nothing to do with Lebanon, or that it has nothing to do with them? Okay, well, here's a better example. Robert and I just went through this. This is from the White House, March 2nd. The Iranian regime of decades of terrorism against citizens, which is American citizens, they argue, which is embarrassing. Because even by their own account, they claim it's 992. Where is that? It's in here somewhere. Or did they remove it? Oh, man, I got to come back to this. No way. Oh, God, that's crazy. I have to remember this. Wow. So here's the point, guys. Robert and I went through this, and the whole point was, and what I'm going to show you is that they're literally telling you that this is Hezbollah, Iran-backed Hezbollah, killing Americans, and that's why we have to go after Iran. But now you want Vance to tell us that they have Lebanon has nothing to do with them? Because now they don't want you to think that them bombing is a violation? Except you literally told us that was a focal point of what we have to stop. I mean, you just can't make this stupidity up. They're trapped, guys. They're trapped by their own lacking of logic. But on top of that, was the point I wanted to relay for the conversation today. In this conversation, and I'm 99% sure, it made it very clear to cite the number, which was 992 Americans that were killed by all the things they claim are Iran. My point is, what do they keep saying? Thousands of Americans have been killed by Iran. Well, by their own account, it was 900 something. Am I missing it? Is it written out? And so what's interesting, which even that, the 900 something is based on not Iran, by elements they claim are Iran. And then the ones that are involving Iran were the illegal invasion of Iraq, where Soleimani and everybody else were defending against their illegal invasion, which everybody knows is illegal invasion based on the lies of WMDs. So all that aside, though, it's just the lies of that's the best they can do to make Iran out to be the bad guy, even though you guys have killed millions of people around the world and war on terror and your occupations and your destabilizations. Anyway, I'm going to have to come back to this because I'm kind of blown away that they would remove this. And I think that speaks for exactly here. Let me do this real quick, since we're almost done. This is going to be interesting if we find out this has been changed, because what it shows you is exactly what I was saying, which is that they put out the number. Shoot. I'm not seeing this. Looks like a weird version of it. Anyway, I'll go back to it. I'll have to go back to my video with Robert so I can find the actual post that we show on the screen. That's strange. I'm just wondering if I'm like inflating something from a different post that was about this from the U.S. government. Anyway, I'll come back to it and waste more time. Interesting, though, because my opinion is that they removed the number because the number belied, they showed you they were lying about the other thing, and they didn't realize that because these people are some of the most incompetent people I've ever seen. Now, AP reports Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz in response to Israeli attacks on Lebanon. Now, here we are again with this same point. And as usual, I mean, it's a small point at this point but it matters to me. It matters to me that the language is incorrect, is inaccurate. Clearly, the strait's not closed. Now, if you want to mean closed to oil, well, that's a different thing, isn't it? It's not. This is a live map of the strait, and it's clearly tons of traffic. Now, most of this, almost entirely, are, regular traffic or, just things that aren't related to military or government or whatever else. Now here, let's look, are the tankers. Probably none, I would argue. Or not. What the heck? Check this out. Guys, these are all tankers. These are all literally tankers. Okay, so that we're being shockingly deceived right now because what I'm seeing, and I can't speak to whether these are on the way out or in, But before this, there was basically nothing. And so at this point in time, here's what I'm going to argue. My guess is that this was kind of in the midst of this, and they paused it because of what the U.S. government and Israel were doing. But either way, closed would imply that there's no traffic at all. And as Iran still says as of right now, it's only about those engaging against them. So it bothers me that they can't be on it, like accurate. Restricted is the accurate word. Iranian's parliament has said Wednesday that a ceasefire negotiations with the U.S. on ending the war is unreasonable as he accused the U.S. of violating their conditions. It comes as not a day-old ceasefire appears at risk of fraying a significant disagreement between parties. Pretty easy to understand what's happening here. So now that this has been effectively back to restriction, which it never really stopped, to be honest, there was a brief moment where they said we were reaching that because they argued Trump gave them everything and they were lying to them. So now it's back to where it was before. But see, yet again, Israel and their propagandists want the world to think that they shot it down, everyone's in danger. But they did not. They restricted it back to where it was based on everything we can see. If you're watching the show, you already know this because I make this point many times already. But go look at the new media. Go look at most people. They shut the Strait down. They did not. Just based on the definitions of the word. And I find that frustrating that people can't be honest about that. It's interesting to me. You know? Oh, here, before I save this, make sure we're back to the full picture. Oh, let's look at military over here. What's that? India, was that UAE, US? Okay, we'll put it back to the full one. You guys can look at it later. Just make note that it's not closed by what everyone is saying. And I do think that's a very important point because my argument is that their propaganda game required the world to think that it was completely shut. Now, here's what Golubov put out today, 1:17 p.m. Statement on the violation of 3 key clauses of the point. The deep historical distrust we hold towards the United States stems from its repeated violations of all forms of commitments. Pretty simple to understand. A pattern that has regrettably been repeated once again. As the President of the United States has clearly stated in his Truth social post, I guess, the Islamic Republic of Iran's 10-point proposal is a workable basis. And based on everybody else, there's only one 10-point plan. I think they're just desperately deflecting and lying about it, either again because Trump lied or because he was lied to. And says, and the main framework for these talks. However, 3 clauses of the proposal have been violated. 1, the non-compliance with the first clause of the 10-point proposal regarding the ceasefire in Lebanon. Simple, which we all knew Israel was not going to stop if you're paying attention. Number 2, the entry of the intruding drone into Iran airspace, which was destroyed in the city of Lars and Fars province in clear violation, which probably was Israel, to be honest, because they don't have any. That's my point, though. They did immediately violate it in all these locations. Denial of Iran's right to enrichment, which was included in the 6th clause. Yes, right? So explain to me why any of this would have gone forward if what Trump said was the truth. Take a second and think about that. If what Trump has said was the reality, why would this have even gone forward? Why would it have been in Iran's interest to pretend to agree to this? Unless you somehow think they were being decimated, and if that's the case, why would they even give them a deal? And if that's the case, now that they disagreed, why wouldn't they be rushing it? I mean, you have to understand, there's an obvious moment where you can realize which side is lying. Now, as always, but in this case, I don't think you can necessarily prove what the truth is. I think it's a clear indication, but what you can see is that somebody's lying. And if Occam's razor, or just kind of looking at motivations, who benefits, things like that, it seems kind of obvious that none of what's happening, it's sort of like the Assad gassing point, right? Assad's gassing everybody and they're killing all the children. It's like, okay, well, it's certainly possible, but why? Like, what's and why would he do it at a moment which gave the U.S. everything they wanted? Well, if you paid attention, you look back and we now know they lied about that in order to justify their actions. So the same point here. Nothing about this is in Iran's interest. So I think it's pretty clear. I think it's self-evident. And so finishes by saying, now the very workable basis on which to negotiate has been openly and clearly violated even before the negotiations began, which would have started on the 11th. In such a situation, bilateral ceasefire or negotiation is unreasonable. So here's what Vance said when it's relayed. I wonder how good Golubov is at understanding English. Just this inherent supremacy and bigotry. Why? Because he's Ronnie and he's too stupid to know another language. The guy speaks more languages than all of you put together, man. And it says, imagine having the audacity to insult another negotiator while, 1, the U.S. posted the English version of Iran's 10 points, which you can find at the example. That's my point from the very beginning. This was something that there was an agreement on. Number 2, Golubov is fluent in English, has given speeches in multiple languages. Number 3, JD only speaks one language. Truly the dumbest to ever do it. I mean, I agree. I think it's a special kind of broken that's happening in this administration. But if your best argument is he's just too dumb to read it or because he's not American, then that's pretty sad. Now, here is what Disclose says, and this is what I think is just pretty pathetic. Trump, and this is basically this morning, but Trump expects peace talks in Iran to happen. Now, realize, yes, this is maybe now they're in a different position. I didn't see anything updated just yet. Let me know if you saw something. My point is that in the beginning of today, they already knew they violated the agreement. They already knew that had happened. Israel immediately went to town. And so it's saying Trump expects peace talks to happen in Pakistan very soon, he says, but that Vance may not attend due to security concerns. As if what you're suggesting that you're all going to be targeted? Probably because of what you're doing in the world. I hope not. I don't want anything to spin out because all that will cause is more chaos. What I want is this for it to actually back down and for the people that caused it to be held accountable for it. We'll have Steve Witkoff and Kushner, JD, maybe JD, I don't know. What an idiot. He won't go because he's in danger. Maybe him, maybe all of them. I don't know. Maybe nobody. Maybe I'll just go to sleep. Who knows? 2 weeks. The point, clearly, is that Witkoff and Jared Kushner are the ones literally controlling the situation. And I think that speaks for itself. Now, as Daniel McAdams says, if Iran sits down for a third time with Witkoff and Kushner, they deserve everything that's coming to them. Absolute madness to tolerate those two monsters as the U.S. negotiating team. And then breaking news, Polymarket reports that U.S. officials announced thousands of Marines and ground forces will continue to be deployed to the Middle East. That was 12 today. Right? So let's keep pretending like they ever planned to this. At the end of the day, this would suggest that Trump never fully intended to uphold whatever he was saying. Or at the very least, or you could say at the very least, either way, or he's not in control, which is something I've been considering very strongly the entire time. Now, just to wrap up here, here's what Alex Jones is putting out. Israel has signaled they're going to hit Iran with nuclear weapons, which says Michael Savage, which, maybe you should question, for plenty of obvious reasons. Certainly possible, right? That Israel would do something like that. Funny to come from someone like him who's been gaslighting us our entire lives about a lot of this stuff. But at the end of the day, what indication do we have about that? I haven't seen somebody openly threaten these things. So here we are again with Jones just leaning into the most extreme hypothetical argument based on so-and-so sources we can't show you, or that Savage has things he can't show you, and just pushing the boundaries for reach. World War III every 30 seconds. Well, now we're at a point where we might actually have it. You're not saying World War III now. How funny is that? Every 30 seconds over my life, you've been saying everything's World War III. Now we're at a point where it's just cartoonish. End of the day, pushing the idea that Israel might threat with nukes and ultimately pushing that to, I think, gain more in with audience that's already been pushing you to the side because you've been clearly hiding the reality. And this is just like, well, fine, I'll just jump far into that discussion. And then, of course, President Trump must rein Netanyahu in. Oh, you mean the guy who you just said was working for a foreign country? The that you just said was occupied by Israel, but now you want the guy occupied by Israel to rein in the person controlling him? Like, what I want you to see right now is the lack of consistency with the arguments they've been putting forward. Here he is in a different conversation from April 7th. We're little Israel now, he says. Yeah, that's the boss. It's true. I can't read. Yeah, Israel's the boss. That's true, he says. Okay, well, so if Israel's in control, then why is Trump going to be able to rein in the person controlling him? That seems counterintuitive, but, typical Jones reporting. He says, sadly, on the 31st, the Trump we all know and love no longer exists. But Trump, help us, do the thing we need. But Trump's gone. He doesn't exist anymore. Trump's gone. MAGA's over, but MAGA's for life. Support the midterms. It's schizophrenic, if you want my honest opinion. Maybe it's all that Ozempic and methylene blue. But he says here on the 5th of April, I'm trying to stop the planned global financial collapse. The Iran war is a globalist economic trap and is the equivalent of COVID 2.0. I mean, he's just repeating what other people are discussing, clearly. And my point, so wait, you're trying to stop the planned global financial collapse. So right now that's clearly happening because of what they're doing. So are you now saying Trump is the globalist? I don't think so. But then it goes, the Iran war is the globalist economic trap. Okay, so there's only one or two things you take from that. Either Trump is being tricked, which implies he's not the bad guy. The globalists have tricked him in this trap. Or it means that Trump and his war are the trap, and he is a globalist. Try to make sense of either one of those arguments with anything he's ever done. And I'm willing to bet you he shifts into whatever he needs to in the next 30 seconds because that's what this guy does. But overall, Trump's either a globalist or he's being tricked. Neither, I mean, the reality is he's very much, the globalist point is that he's never going to say that. He's always, if he is, then that means you've been supporting the very globalist that you've always told us you've been fighting, even by accidental means, which he'll never admit. But at the end of the day, these people are very clearly pushing in the globalist agenda, very clearly building the new tangential UN Board of Peace, the new WHO proposal, identical. New World Order, all the different conversations. Lastly, a carbon copy, I guess, in a similar way. Glenn Beck. Like I said, not carbon copy, similar, very, let's say similar in a lot of ways. There's only one thing he writes that could actually stop us, he means the U.S. government, from beating Iran. Because clearly they're just completely dead. This is a guy, somebody who's literally just going, well, they said they're decimated. They're decimated because I just repeat what government says or claims he's got this insight. Guys, that's not what's happening. Now, I'm not going to say I have full insight into every part that's going on, but there are there's a mountain of evidence out there coming from tons of different sources showing you, and a lot of them are in the U.S., a lot of them are military, that Iran is not decimated, that Iran continues to demonstrate that they have planned for this. And people like this go, well, they're just completely destroyed. So you should take note of the bad journalism or the willful deception. And he says the only way we can stop ourselves, or rather the government, from beating Iran is the fracturing of the American people. Right. So trust the plan. Come together and support the illegal war that literally nobody wanted, that Trump told us he wouldn't do. Because, we got to win, right? Guys, we need to know who these people are. Whether even they recognize what they're doing, this is what they are. And he says, I understand not wanting war. Oh, do you, Glenn? He goes, however, we're in one now, so you might as well just blindly support the government. This is not a journalist, guys. He says, so I'd prefer the win. Sadly, it seems a lot of Americans would rather Iran win. It's just a study. This is binary nonsense. And guys, this is embarrassing if you're an honest person and not blindly partisan. The age of Alex Jones and Glenn Beck, it's dead. It's dying. It's going away, which is why they're all slowly trying to morph into whatever else is going on. Dave Smith says, yes, the reason why this war is such a disaster is because of all the people who oppose it, clearly. He says, he's being sarcastic. Glenn pretended to have learned from his disastrous cheerleading of previous wars, but it was all BS. Like all the rest of them. No wars, peace, president, and then war, because win, because that's what makes sense. I think this couldn't be more clear. I want you guys to always do your own due diligence. I want you to do your research. I've been wrong plenty of times. I could be wrong now about any number of things, but I will always give you what I think is the accurate view, the picture that I see, and I'll give you as much evidence I possibly can to back up everything and be clear about what I can prove and what I think is my opinion. But what am I missing? We had an entire run up of where Trump was lying and lying and lying. And yet here we are. And it seems there's obviously Iran involvement, but then with the way it ended up, I think it explains itself. I think that he lied to drive this to a point to where he would give himself more time in a position where they're losing. We need to come to terms with that. And now that doesn't have to mean in anything other than the strategic position they're in and their lack of ability to see this through. That's what you get. If you're Iran and you plan for this, knowing that you wouldn't be able to defeat certain parts of their military, you don't just plan to just grow military strength. You think. You plan a way around their belligerent, think about it. You have this lumbering giant that always comes out swinging, and that's the only thing they ever do. And you're not big enough. You go, okay, well, what's a strategy? What do we do? Let's duck and let them trip over us. There you go. It's kind of a joke, but look at what just happened. And I think that's what they did. And they planned for this. And now they know that they can stand here and hold this out. The evidence shows they can. That the option would be to militarily go as far as you can to potentially use nuclear weapons or to admit that you can't. It's like look at what's going on with Gaza. You realize this still, now they haven't defeated Hamas. There's a reason for that. It's the same kind of argument. And that's why they're trying to get the world to help them just bomb and destroy and push and get them, move them out of the air, because that's what they have to do. So if you can't see this by now, truly, like who these people are and what they're trying to accomplish, as Hegseth tells the military, they're fighting Armageddon. They're literally fighting for a religious war. I mean, again, I don't think you want to see it. And trust me, I get why. It's wild. But if you're America first, if you truly want what's best for this country, or more appropriately, if you just want best for, if you care about human life and you want these things to stop, you got to call it out. You truly have to see beyond the partisanship and see beyond the ridiculous nature of people like Glenn Beck and Alex Jones, or left, right, the whole damn thing, and just look for the facts, because it's there. It is. I mean, it's not that difficult to see why we on this platform and plenty others and the IMA in general, why we can continually be so far ahead of most of these stories, because it's obvious. I think these things are very clear, but I present them as my opinion at the time because they are my opinion based on the evidence, and then one after another, they come to pass. I'm just demonstrating our value. Look for yourself. Goes back a long way. So thank you for tuning in, guys. Please share the content, make your clips, tag me in it. You want to support the platform? We always need your support. We only exist because of you. It's a donation-built platform. The only thing that keeps this platform going is your direct donation. That's the only thing. There's no advertising, nothing else. I mean, frankly, I'd rarely even say that, which is probably why we don't, it's not my focal point. I care about you. I care about the information. And I'd like to believe that in and of itself will be enough to drive people to support this platform. Thank you for tuning in. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.